Beyond Binaries, Understanding Sexual Identities and Queer Rights Issues in India. Day 2. Namaste and greetings. I, Samriddhi, visiting researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #WebPolicyLearning. Today, we are gathered here for day 2 of Beyond Binaries, Understanding Sexual Identities and Queer Rights Issues in India, an online international summer school program, a 5-day immersive online certificate training course. This training program is organized by the IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center, GISC. This program has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise for this 5-day immersive online certificate training course. Our chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, Visiting Distinguished Professor, IMPRI. The distinguished expert panel includes Maya Avasthi ji, Dr. Kaustav Padmapati ji, Sonal Gyani ji, Rituparna Niyok ji, Dr. Aksa Sheikh, Ara Akun ji, Vikramaditya Sahai ji, Professor Mala Ramanathan ji, Professor Pushpesh Kumar ji, Mr. Adhiraj Parasarthi ji, Professor Veena Vaswani ji, Vijayanti Vasanta Mogli ji, Dr. Preeti Barman ji, Harish Iyer ji, Rituparna Boraji, Dr. Debolina De, Dr. Devashish Maitra, Dr. Lavanya Arvindji. The convener for this program is Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI. A warm welcome to the course Beyond Binaries, Understanding Sexual Identities and Queer Rights Issues in India. Your active involvement in this program highlights the critical importance of engaging in open and meaningful discussions surrounding sexual identities and queer rights. By exploring these topics together, we can deepen our understanding, challenge societal norms, and work together towards fostering an inclusive and equitable society for all. Thank you for joining us on this transformative journey. We have also shared the study materials and course outlined via email on the topic related to Beyond Binaries for better perusal and understanding. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. It is imperative that you join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box and not on the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise, and please refrain from making general comments in the questions to save time. Our theme for day 2 is Queer Politics in Contemporary Political Atmosphere. Our session for day 2 will cover topics of queerness, rural reality and movement building from a rural perspective, mobilization of queer community and intervention with a focus on rural India by Rituparna Niyok, healthcare of transgender and non-binary persons by Dr. Aksa Sheikh, anti-caste theories on gender by Aro Akunji, and A History of Trans as Gender by Vikramaditya Sahai. Now, without any further ado, let's start the program. It's my honor and privilege to invite the chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much. Simriddhi, 1 minute. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much, Simriddhi. I thank Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Nitya, Vajanti, Naina, our Aswata, and Samriddhi for their hard work, and greet Rituparna ji, Dr. Aksa, Aro Angut, and Vikramaditya ji, and the esteemed participants. Yesterday, we had a very lively session and we exceeded time limit by 90 minutes. So today, I humbly request all 4 speakers to stick to their time of 25 minutes of presentation, and also the participants, 15 minutes we will have discussion. Yesterday, we were inundated with the questions. More than 50 questions were asked to 4 speakers, but I think we need to stick to time because yesterday we finished at 10 o'clock and so many participants had many other responsibilities. So I think let us now today, I don't like to use my chairperson's prerogative and stop the speakers in between, but I think self-discipline is the best way of handling this situation. Now, the brief recap that yesterday we had co-presentation. It started with historical aspects of trans lives in India, where Maya Avasthi ji gave us a proper perspective on historical genesis and historical unfolding of the political economy and the social standing of the transgender community in the ancient times, in the medieval times, in the pre-colonial India, and also during the colonial period, where for the first time transgender communities got brutalized and also criminalized. So it was a very important understanding to historically contextualize the positioning of the queer community. The queer term came much, much later. I had given a brief history of how the Pride month, June was declared as a Pride month, and after that, my presentation focused on body normativity and sexuality, and I also deconstructed various forms of masculinities and feminities and various variation of patriarchy, right from extremely volatile and aggressive patriarchy to the benevolent patriarchy. Dr. Kaustav Padampati's presentation on non-binary identity and transgenders in India, importance of queer movement in socio-cultural space of Northeast India, was an extremely interesting and fascinating narrative, as well as analytically very rigorous thing, where he used the term subaltern for the Northeastern queer community. And he said that he gave the examples of four states, Assam, Mizoram, Manipur, and Meghalaya. And all of them had a very different, you can't club them together because each one of them had a very rich socio-cultural and historical unfolding and and history. He also showed us videos of the films, the Bihu dance, and other cultural tradition where gender inclusivity was very much and gender diversity was respected and gender inclusivity was found. And then we had a presentation by Madam Siani, who started with a personal testimony and so roller coaster life of hers, ups and downs in her life of disabling and enabling environment, and how each challenging situation she converted into an empowerment, and not only her personal empowerment, but then she started working for the community, built up an institution, several institutions of the LGBTQ community, because women, she said that even among the queer community, lesbians suffer more than the gays. And we had a very, very interesting discussion. Now, today, these four presentations we have are going to further enrich our understanding, and it's going to be a very fascinating experience. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we start the session with your permission, ma'am.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Now I would like to request Rituparna Niyogji to take the session forward. Rituparna Niyogji is a queer rights activist, founder, and director of Akam Foundation, queer intersectional feminist, and a storyteller. Rituparna ji will be covering the topic of the queerness, rural reality and movement building from rural perspective, mobilization of queer community, and intervention with a focus on rural India. Over to you.
Thank you, Samriti. Thank you, Professor Patel. I would just like to ask one thing, because my timing was allotted to 6 to 6:40. Now it's 6:12. So what will be my time? By when I should be finished?
Go on till 7 o'clock. Means you're with Q&A.
Including Q&A. Okay, cool. Thank you.
So up to 6:45, you can speak. And
sure, thank you so much. And also, I can't see the participants or what? Is it a room?
Yeah.
Okay. Then maybe I don't know for whom I should speak. That's really strange. Like first time I will be speaking like this, like I'm speaking to my participants, but they are only not here. Maybe I'll request the team to switch on your video so that I feel that I am speaking to someone, not to the blank screen, because I'm a storyteller, and then as a storyteller, I know what's the value of having interaction and looking at the people, because I read people's face. Then only you can feel that you can go ahead. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this, and also putting this wonderful list of panel. And I wish that for 5 days I can listen to everyone. But yeah, no, that's not the case. And I'm also happy that three of our collective member, our leaders, are also part of the program. And thanks to the team for extending the support to them. And yeah, I will start my sharing, as I'm saying sharing, because I will be talking mostly from my experience working from a rural perspective, and also in small towns, especially in Assam. And before that, I just want to say that today's whoever is presenting, I'm really honored to say at the same panel or the same space with all of you. Especially, I can see Bikamaditya here. So hello. So anyway, so yes, I will be speaking mostly from my experience, how we are working, and why we are working, and how we are working. So these three things I will try to cover, like why we are doing, what we are doing, and how we are trying to do this whole movement building practice from a very rural perspective or a small town perspective. So for that, I want to give one context that I belong to a rural area. Where I grew up, that is Jorhat district, and it's in uppermost side of Assam. And my village was in 11 kilometers away from the district headquarters. I studied till class 7 in a small school in my village. Then for my high school, I shifted to a little bit bigger school in the town. And then till class 12, I studied there. And for my graduation and for master's, I went to Guwahati. And I studied there, and I experienced the whole queer space and the queer rights movement there. And then because by 2014 only, it was flourishing in Guwahati also, like many new people were coming up, and they were trying to take up the work, and they are trying to build a movement. And when I was a student that time, and I was involved around the spaces, I always used to say that our movement had to go beyond. Our movement has to go beyond. So I was also maybe not articulated like what I mean also by that, saying that our movement have to go beyond. But I always wanted to say that because we, the queer people, are not just in the city space. We are living everywhere, every corners of the country, every different strata of the society, be it caste, be it class, be it religion, and be it different social reality. So then what about those people? Because not everyone is being able to come to sorry, electricity. Maybe for some time I will just put my rural reality. So this is how we work. Okay, I'll just put my video for some time. Yeah. Talking about rural reality and experiencing. So maybe some of the participants will understand. Anyway, because everyone is living every corner and every part of the society, and we have to reach to everyone, and we cannot leave anyone behind. But our movement is also growing, and there is a reason why our people, our movement, our activists get a space in urban area or in metropolitan city. Now we're talking about the space. This whole activism or the work of mine also started from the very fact or the thing that we are not getting space, or I was not getting any space space, being a queer person coming from a rural space. And I was always wondering, the people whom I know from my village or from my other villages who needed to stay back in the village only, who could not go for their further study, finding a space in the city space. What about those people? So this was the thinking, this was the thought process, that not everyone has the queer desire to go to bigger city, or if they have the queer desire also, how many of us can, okay, electricity is back. So how many of us can move to city space and can live with our own, because not everyone has the agency to go and live there and make their own space. And or maybe a lot of people need to come back to their own home after study, because you really cannot sustain in the city. Then what about those people in small town and the rural area? So with this thinking, the whole work started, and sharing this experience only, I will try to talk about why we need to do this also. So the kind of work which I am involved now, it started back during COVID time, when we felt that everyone was alone and people need to be together. Someone needs to be heard and we need to hear each other out. So from that point, we started mobilizing, and through Google Meet, through WhatsApp group, people who were living in different parts of Assam, in small town, in village, and especially those people who actually came back from the city area, but from the bigger town, from the educational institute. And then we started gathering more people and organizing more people, and we used to have online meetup. So when we would have online meetup, we used to talk, just endless talk and conversation, at times just sharing poetry, reading session, at times just singing. And from that point, we thought that we need to do something. So in that thought, in 2021 April, in Jorhat, that's my town, we did a community meetup for the first time. We did something which was happening outside of Guwahati, which was a bigger event, like around 100 people came. And then everyone felt that we need to build this momentum, because here people are coming out with a lot of courage. Someone came that I have some work, I need to go to the district library. Someone came that I have these things, which saying so many things. They came to the meetup, and we could just do it. And since then we started mobilizing the community more actively and started working towards building spaces. Now, again, I use the word creating or building spaces, because space is the thing, metaphorically also, or maybe in a real sense also, we really do not have just to express, just to be yourself, just to talk about yourself also. If you do not have the space, then how you are going to talk about your rights also? So from that point of view, or from that perspective, that we have to talk about our rights, we have to claim our rights, and then for that we have to build our space, or we have to create our space. So from that point of time, we started mobilizing more people. And in 2022 April, we organized the Jorhat Pride Walk in Jorhat town. And that was historical, or maybe a very different sense for us, because Guwahati has Pride Walk since 2014, and Guwahati being a bigger city, it has the space. But in Jorhat, thinking about it also, we had a lot of challenge, because if you are going for taking permission also, nobody understands what you were trying to do. And everyone is like, "Bhago yahan se," what they were trying to do. So our team on ground, they actually worked hard, and we could do on, I think, 17th April or 16th April, I forgot the date exactly, around 250 people came to the street and we walked together. So when we did this Pride Walk, one thing we focused was how we can involve the local college and local other institute. And there is a reason why I am mentioning about it. So before Pride Walk, we used to go to the local college and the other institute and organize awareness program. awareness, organized talk with the departments, different departments, and with the students. And this is not only Jorhat, also in Dibrugarh also it was the same thing. So when Jorhat Pride Walk gave the boost to the people that we can do this more. So in Dibrugarh, when we started mobilizing the community and the work, we targeted all the institute here. So all our leaders used to go to different hostels in the Dibrugarh University, especially in the evening chai time, because everyone knows that all the hostelers will come and gather in the hall, and they will have a presentation for 10 minutes. What is LGBTQI terminologies, what is pride, what is movement, and all. And they will go with a dabba and they will ask, oh, give us donation now. So, this was it. Actually, this was a very strategically we used to do to engage the people in general. Because when we are this rural reality, we understood one thing, that the cultural context of rural reality is very different. It's a community sense, it's a community belongingness in just general life of rural reality, in small town reality, because we live with each other. We talk to neighbors. We have to, live with the whole village. You cannot ignore anyone. In a bigger city or in a bigger space, you can just be in your own flat. You don't need to bother about the other person also who is living just beside your flat. But in rural area, you have to live as a community. So it means you have to engage with everyone. You just can't simply ignore. In small town, it's the same thing. And this is the reason we started getting engaged with people. And this is where I will talk about the allyship building. Because when we talk about movement building, allyship building is the most important thing. We really cannot work just in ghetto. Okay, we have these people and we will be sitting and we'll be just talking and we will be always coming together. No. But how much we are trying to, bring people together, hold people together so that we can, move forward together. So one thing very interestingly or very joke way also, I always say that, our activism is not really concentrated in cafe house or cafeteria, because this we really see from an accessibility point of view also. So when we in a city space or urban space, we get, come along in a cafe or in a sophisticated place, are we really looking at the accessibility or inclusion from everyone? Can everyone come to this cafe? Does everyone has the affordability to come to the cafe and pay for whatever you need to pay there? So in our work, when we see that if someone is also not being able to come or included, then that's not the way we will work. And we have to coexist. We have to exist among everyone. So this is the point where we started getting involved and engaging the local college and university. Why we did also? Because our population are there. The young people who are studying, who are exploring, who are trying to find themselves, they are there. Now, for me, my biggest friend or the ally is the college professors, because they are powerful. One thing I know, they are powerful, and they are there in college and university. And also the people in administration, be it district administration, be it college or be it university. I'm talking about the rural Assam or the small towns in Assam. And my people, my humans, they are studying there. If tomorrow something is happening to the people and if they are coming and reaching out to me, I have to have some agency there. I have to have someone there in the college or the university whom I can reach out and I look into this matter, because I am outside of the college campus or I'm outside of the university campus. This is the point I started building relationship with different stakeholders. I will use the word because it includes the administration, it includes the university teachers and college teachers. And very wonderfully, I would like to say, over the period of time, a beautiful feminist friendship we could build together. I always term this word as a feminist friendship, and all the feminist friendships, they are there in the different colleges in Assam, and mostly they are cis hetero women, or maybe cis women who are teaching in different colleges, who are part of the women's cell, or maybe who are part of the IQSC cell of the college. And I targeted, or I started getting connected with different women's cell of different colleges, because you have to, when you are talking about movement building, you have to look at the possible people or the possible agency or the institute who can be your help, who can potentially be come together and to listen to you. And I found it's the women professors or women teachers who are teaching in colleges are very approachable and maybe very understanding, and coming to this whole work. And this is, I'm giving a generalized comment, but that's fact, because when we go and organize very awareness program also, we see a very less footfall of male teacher, because I don't know whatever the reason, maybe we know all the reason, but it's the women who always take up the initiative within the college, and they only do it. So anyway, this feminist friendship building, we have been really focusing on how we are being able to engage all the college and university. Now, why it is important also, if I will say, now we need to go and reach out to the young people. If we need to talk about this whole issues in a large level, if we want young people to take up action around gender justice, we have to reach out to them. So we need those institutes, and for those institutes, we have to have a gateway how we can get entered. So through this allyship building, we started getting engaged in different colleges. So in last 2 years, we have reached to more than 30 colleges and university in Assam, mostly in small town and rural area, not even in Guwahati. In Guwahati city, only one college, that's Dispur College. So far, we have programs there. So it's an interesting thing. You can see that no other college, there are so many reputed colleges who exist for 50 years, more than 50 years, 70 years, they are not interested, they are least further. But our engagement is also in the rural area. So more than 30 colleges we have reached out, and we have reached out to around 8,000 people, 8,000 young people in last 2 years through conversation, through dialogue, through awareness program. So when we go to different colleges, I will give two example of two colleges. One is called Manohari Devi Kanai Girls College in Dibrugarh. So the program was attended by more than 600 students. And it was a huge program. Like, come on, someone is coming to, listen to gender and sexuality, LGBTQI community, and everyone very patiently listening, no resistance. In Digboi College, it was the college gave me the number later. It was exactly 542 students who actually give signature, and around 40 faculty member came, and it's a very, very rural area in the border, last border, small town of Assam and Arunachal. So just after that, Arunachal Pradesh. So this is how I see, and we see how we can talk about the movement building. Now, every work we are doing, it's these colleges, these universities, the different departments who are friends to us, they come and they contribute. And we try to do this work together. And it's that engaging in our work also, like after one day we have a summer school. So there we can see that local college, university teachers and professors, they're actually contributing in our program. It's not taking up space also, but they are coming and contributing in our cause. So it's a long process how we are being able to involve everyone together. And I see in this way only progress. Not that, we are just bashing about each other. We are canceling and we are saying that no one is understanding us. No one is doing this. Yes, we will rant about it also. We will talk about it also. If somewhere is going to be shitty, we are going to talk about shitty against them also. But I will talk about making and building friendship and coexisting. This is really, really, really important. Now talking about space, coming back space again, like now we have friends, you have ally, but how you are creating more spaces, this is also important. So with college and university, this is also part of space creation only. When we go and talk about gender and sexuality, when we go and talk about gender beyond binary, we are sort of creating a different space there so that someone can feel that, oh, it exists here also. This professor of my college think about it. Maybe women's cell of our college will help me in this. A queer person at least will think who are studying in this college. Uh, Now I will talk a little bit about physical space, how we are seeing physical space and creating more space in that sense. One thing is that I have been very active the last 5 years. I am working on building community library. And free community library, not just community library, but free community library, where by free, what we mean that nobody need to pay 1 rupee also, a 5 rupee also, a 10 rupee also as a membership fee to come and access to the library space. Also, by means when we talk about free community library, it means it's breaking the barrier of caste, disability, religion, gender, everything, and everyone has the equal space. This by two way we talk about free community library, which welcome everyone with love, which creates space for everyone. And why community library also? Because what I believe around books, we just melt down and we do not become so aggressive also. And this gave a sense to us how we can coexist. For example, a library exists in a community, and you were organizing a program or talking about something. I'm sure if neighbor also has some problem, they will not come and do some rakas. Maybe that's my confidence. Maybe someone might have different level of experience or something like that. And this is where we had this idea to build Chandraprabha Hoikyani Feminist Library and Resource Center, where I'm sitting right now. So Chandraprabha Hoikyani was one of the most pioneering feminist leader in Assam. We will say in British time, maybe she is the one who actually brought this feminist movement to Assam. She was the one with a bicycle going to different villages and bringing girls for education. She was a single mother that time only, and she dared to challenge the society that without marriage, I will be pregnant and I'm not going to abort my child and I give birth and I'll give my name. So she was a rebellious. So we could not find any other better name than her to give our library in this way. So Chandraprabha Hoikyani Feminist Library and Resource Center. So this also we see in this way how this can contribute to the larger movement building practice. Because continuously I'm talking about space, LIC building, and then movement building. So we have to have space which can continuously contribute to the movement building practice. Because when we are talking about us, we being marginalized community, I really do not see progress with us in a project mode of NGO or something like that. Where you have the 6 months project, so 1 month project. Yes, we will need those also, but I really cannot see in a long term. But how for a long term with a bigger vision, how we are building space and contributing to the movement and building a movement together so that everyone talk about it. And we have space from where we can thrive and from where we can rise. So for me, community library is the space. Because community library can be served as a information center. An information center to my own community who can educate themselves. When you have information, when you can educate yourself, you can talk for yourself. You can raise voice for yourself, and you have a space to talk about yourself. You have a space to think about your rights, and then tomorrow we are going to talk about it. So this is how I see the value of community library when we are working on movement building for any marginalized community. It's not just about my community. It's about the Dalit community. It's about the Adivasi community. It's about the tribal community in Northeast. Because you give a book to any child or anyone, then you are giving a doorway to this world. So this is where this idea of community library came to the intersection of our movement building practice. Because from tomorrow, we can organize, we can start working for Pride Rally or other work from here. Because I am never going to talk about Pride in a cafe. It doesn't make sense for me, at least. It will make sense for someone. I'm not canceling the other people also. It might make sense for them. But in my reality, it doesn't make any sense. Because in my reality, I will invite the daddy, I will invite the nani or phubi or anyone who was his neighbor or the chata or the tauji. Please come and look and listen to this story. We have a storybook. You can listen to my story. I will listen to your story also. Maybe tomorrow we will work hand to hand together. This is where I see the movement building practice. So last year when we did Pride Rally in Dibrugarh, it was more than 500 people came and joined us. And we saw that how all this institute came forward and how we could organize different events and different programs. One of the leaders is here only, Kaipasri, who also actually they can also share their idea, because Lipi, who is a participant here, who is one of our young leader, who was instrumental in organizing Pride work. So I was just there only, but they are the one who did actual work. Kaibasri is there, Pixie is there, who are members of our collective and leaders of our collective. They did all the amazing work, engaging people and bringing people together. So we believed in Pride work when we do, it's a series of events, series of activity we do when we are doing Pride Rally. Not just that the day we will go and we will be just there. No, it's a series of activity, how we are engaging the local community around the area, maybe through Nukkanatak, maybe through poster making event, maybe through awareness program, how we are doing different programs and different things all together so that we can actually have a narrative around it, which in Assamese we call Janajagaran. I don't know what it will be in Hindi or English, Janjagaran or something like that. So we really see this whole work as a Jan Andolan kind of thing. It's not just about me. Pride is about everyone, right? So we believed that when someone is saying, okay, I support you, I support you, I support you. But in street, if someone is coming and walking with you, that's the true solidarity. Because you are actually coming and stepping out of your home and you were standing there, and from there maybe you cannot pitch a hug or something like that, then you have to work really together with all of us. So this is where we see how we can work this together. So and then when we talk about this rural reality, how much we are understanding the cultural context also, and then how we are navigating to assert our queerness. It's a very challenging task, or it's a everyday dilemma for you, how you are embracing your queerness and you are coexisting. So because you have to coexist there, then how we are creating small agency, how we are creating or initiating small conversations through which you can coexist, and at the same time you can assert your queerness. So this is where our whole work is based on and we are trying to moving forward, because we know one thing, that we cannot get it from people. You have to engage with people, you have to bring people together, क्योंकि सबको तो घर नहीं छोड़ना है ना, गांव से नहीं जाना है, और मुझे गांव में ही रहना भी. Because as I always say, I being an Assamese person, I really hold my Assamese identity very proudly. So I always say that Dharma is also mine. Dharma is one of our cultural things. Bihu is also mine. Potha is also mine. My Bhasa is also mine. Everything is mine being a queer person, because my queerness is just one part of me. So then how I am asserting all those. For that, I am working towards bringing everyone together. How we are engaging with the media, how we are engaging the writers and that community who are maybe intellectual community, how you are engaging the policy maker, and how you are engaging the local representative. So through this, maybe we can go towards this coexist and building this whole movement together. And in my activism, there's never a compromising state when I talk about these things, because it's all about building friendship, bringing people together, and rising together and thriving together. So this is how we are seeing. Maybe I try to cover why we are doing this work, what we are doing, and how we are doing this work. Why? Because there is no space. You have to have space so that you can assert yourself. You can talk about your rights. You can claim your rights, and you have to build a space. And you don't have space. This is why you want to do, and you are doing through LIC building, feminist friendship, and bringing people together, and by coexisting. So this is where I believe how we can go forward for movement building practice, and we can build a movement together. And this is what I can see, and I have been experiencing in Assam. My other work ally on does. I'm like, नहीं मैंने बहुत कर लिया, अभी तुम्हारा ड्यूटी है, तुम करो, तुम लेबर करो. And it happens through what it's called, this friendship building. When we put up this library together, it's the CSF people who donated. I'm like, no, you have to donate now, क्योंकि जितना गड़बड़ किया है अभी repair करना है. So you donate, you contribute, you come and you give your labor. So I'm very clear about it. So, and this is how we are trying to do. So yeah, thank you. I will keep a pause here, and we'll be waiting for questions from the participants. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the insightful session. Now, your contributions were really relatable and valuable, and it made the session truly impactful. Thank you for sharing your time, knowledge, and authenticity with us. Thank you. I would request Professor Vibhuti Patel to provide her remarks. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. My heartfelt thanks to Rituparna ji for such a fascinating story. I think you are a visionary organizer par excellence. You reminded me of, I felt very nostalgic when you were speaking. It reminded me of late 70s and early 80s, where women's feminist movement of India was also like that. We used to meet in somebody's home, one who had a larger drawing room. We would meet them. People would bring food. There would be potluck lunches and dinners, all night discussions to clarify our thoughts. So I think I can see so many parallels in that. No, the commitment, and also the question of reaching out, building a networks. No, that's very important. And the main difference I saw with this experience and the Western experience, where the feminist movement and the queer movement, initially they were at loggerheads, and there is a lot of bitterness now also. And even when I teach this subject in the classroom, they recite, they tell us the story of this bitterness, no, but which is not there in Indian context. And I think that is very inspiring, that we are building bridges. And the third one, that your point which I liked, is that no cancel culture. I think we need to reach out. So it's a very, very important. I think that itself shows the democratic essence with which your movement is working, and the basic non-violence. No, non-violence, I say, both in philosophically also and in the day-to-day life also, that reaching out, chacha, mama. And I like your phrase very much, the gadbad kiya hai, usse theek karna hoga. I think that's very important. All of us, the civilizational and epistemic injustices that have been made, that have to be repaired, and for which collective and extremely inspiring the experience that I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vibhuti Patel. One thing I just want to add here, when you said about the loggerheads between feminist movement and the queer rights movement, I see it's intersectional feminist work and the feminist movement work, because I will talk about caste identity, I'll talk about religion, I'll talk about everything. It's a feminist movement to work only. Also, if some feminists is then coming and saying, I'm like, hum tumko pata hi nahi denge na. So if someone is trying and coming and not trying to give me space, I'm like, you are no one to give me space or not giving space. So I have my space, I will claim my space. So this is why I do not see any conflict. I'm like, if I will not see the conflict, I will not acknowledge this mindset only, then there's nothing. So I'll be just be there. So this is how I see. And I have been trying to build a cordial relationship with the civil society in Assam. And so far we have a very cordial relationship, and this is how we have to go, because you can't be in every space, you can't be in every aspect of work. Someone is doing some work, someone is doing some work, you have to coordinate, or you have to go and contribute. For example, someone is working the women rights thing, maybe you are not working, but then there is a connection. Of course, there is someone is working on just livelihood. I have to learn from them also. So as a civil society, we have to grow together. This is the reason इसीलिए हमारे ऊपर इतना तोड़फोड़ हो रहा है, and they are being able to do the तोड़फोड़ also because there is no unity among us. We have competition for funding, we have competition for this and that, and moreover we will cancel each other. अरे इतना ही तो लोग हैं, हम चंद लोग हैं, and इसको ही हम अपने आप में तोड़ेंगे तो कैसे चलेगा? वो लोग तो ज्यादा लोग हैं जो गड़बड़ करने वाला है. So I do not see in that sense, क्योंकि चंद लोगों को झुंड बनाना पड़ेगा, and जब झुंड बनाएंगे ना, कोई भी तो डरेंगे. तो ये बात हम मानते हैं. हाँ जी, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now the floor is open for questions from the audience. Yeah, I think we have a few hands raised and a few questions in the Q&A box.
Yeah, Dr. Debolina Day is
Dr. Debolina Day.
Okay, over.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Rituparna. I enjoyed your talk so much. I just sat listening and marveling at the kind of visionary work that you're doing in small town India. I grew up in small town India. I was born and raised there. So a lot of my psychic blueprints come from small town India. And in fact, even though a lot of my queer activism has or advocacy has happened in Delhi, I am aware of the fact of my complicated relationship with my small town. So listening to your paper gave me a lot of hope, and it was so action rich. Your paper about libraries, about repair work, I love that, and I just want to thank you for it firstly before asking my question. Excellent talk. I'm so glad I listened to you. So actually, because I lived such a divided existence in a sense, I carry the small townness and live in Delhi in a sense. I grapple with some of the larger questions about intersectionality. I carry those contradictions. Now, from the picture you presented, it was a beautiful picture, but I wonder if it is that harmonious. Like, what about religion? What about religious harmony? What about religious texture? What do you do with that? Because I find myself really at loggerheads inside of me with, I don't know, I heard you at the beginning of your paper saying that not all of us want to go to the big city. And I go like 20 years back, and I think that part of the reason why I felt compelled to leave that small town was because I thought, I would never have space to live some kind of an authentic life in Siliguri, right?
True.
When I think of going back, or when my mother is now living with me, there are some really, like, education also alienates you, knowledge also alienates you. So how do you bridge that gap? Like, you're coming, you inhabit these different spaces, you're coming and presenting this paper here, which seems like it's very harmonious. But I think if you sort of gave us a picture of how much conflict also there is, that would also equip some of us to actually resolve some, and probably these contradictions are not to be resolved, but those of us who feel very tortured by some of the absolutely, like, very problematic discourses that, I have to constantly battle every day, living with family, complicated. How do you do this? I just want to know that.
Thank you, Debolina. And we can't ignore those facts. And we need to talk about those also, because then only it's a complete picture. So for me, so far, there is not much resistance, though there is always underlying tension. For example, when we were doing the Dibrugarh Pride work, when just Paltu Gunda came and just like, oh, how can you raise Azadi slogan? And this a small incident happened, and then we could just usko bhagao and all. We could do it because our young leaders went and said ki, we want azadi from this toxic masculinity, we want azadi from people like you. So that's a small incident, I will say, but there is some underlying current you always see or hear, like or there is some conditional thing also comes, like, oh, it's fine, you were talking about transgender because he Hindu Sanskriti ka हिस्सा है, but don't talk about gay and bisexual or lesbian क्योंकि ये हमारे पास नहीं है. ऐसा भी उल्टे उल्टे आते हैं काम तक कि no, you should not talk about it, maybe यहाँ पे तुम मत करो, maybe someone is talking about you, but so far actually talking about it, not that kind of resistance is coming to my experience कि सामने आके किसी ने धमकाया है, ऐसा नहीं हुआ है, but then that other kind is there. For example, when we were doing Jorhat Pride Walk, we got to know that someone from right wing, they were trying to influence the district administration that don't give permission for this kind of thing. So, but the district administration, that's why very thankfully gave us permission long ahead, so that later on nobody can do anything, because see, those allied to people who understand, they are also in different parts now. The kind of shitty people are around, so there are good people also. So in college and university there is not much resistance because of those feminist friendship. So maybe one thing is that just ignoring those people who do not want to engage, who do not understand, who do not want to listen. I just do not waste my time and energy with them. Actually, honestly saying, if I will talk about in social media, if there is some troll is happening, if something is, I really never reply, because it's going to waste my time. Instead of that, I will actually work on narrative building. I'm like, who are you? I just simply block them. I don't know kahan se ye aaya, but maybe experiencing these people and seeing, and I'm like, I put a lot of values in me. Like I have values of every 1 minute. I do not waste any time. Otherwise, you cannot do this kind of work. Like, so I just simply block people. And if you will see my timeline also, there is no hate comment. And this is how I try to carry myself. This is how I try to build a narrative around you, around me, that you cannot come and violate me. And if you will come and violate, try to me also, I will dismiss you like anything. You cannot do this. So that's strong I will try to do, but it's not easy also. You get tired, you are tired to be strong all the time. I am tired strong all the time. I do not want to be tired strong all the time. I just want to be myself, just the usual person. But this happens. But this kind of resistance is not coming a lot, because that says what I said now, talk about the LIC building, and how strategically I try to get involved with everyone. So this helped when we did the 2021 Pride meetup in Jorhat. When we were not getting any space because municipality was not giving any space or not giving any permission, we reached out to the principal of Jorhat College. Now, look, principal is in a power position, right? So if you have an ally there, so if principal is giving you permission, then nobody can stop you. So if the principal is giving permission, come and we will open the gate of our college, that anyone can come to our college that day. No employee of the college can actually come and put question finger to you. So this is where I see. So by joking again, I say कि हम तो बड़े साहब के साथ बात कर रहे थे. So that babu culture, but that's a joke again.
No, that's amazing. Humor is amazing. I think humor is so useful.
Yeah, by true humor, I actually try to, what it's called, resist or maybe try to sustain myself. Heaven is joke, I say. So yeah, no, but that's honestly I'm saying. So this stakeholder engagement is actually helping me. कि हम ऐसे कोने में बैठ के छाती पीट के रोएंगे क्यों? इसके अलावा हम जाके रिलेशनशिप बिल्ड करेंगे ना. पहले एक इंसान के साथ रिलेशनशिप बिल्ड करेंगे कॉलेज में, then उसके through we will go to the other people. So I see in this way, connecting people. I do not really see the networking, because networking is a very NGOized word. All this Bangalore and Mumbai का startup organization जो IIT का job छोड़ के आया है ना, वो जो organization खोल के बैठा है, दुकान चला रहा है, बड़ा funding है, their word, all this networking, collaboration is work. I do
I
have
love this.
collaboration. Feminist work is all about collaboration, learning from each other, growing together. It's all about friendship. It's all about networking only. And you were putting level like networking. How much network you have? No, we have very good network. And we see really a great fellow. So that's how connecting people, one person,
Yes.
then and another person, and making a joint. I always believe in joint. Or yeah, so that's how we are
Thank you.
trying.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a few questions in the Q&A sections. Victor Ji, could you unmute
Yeah, I
yourself?
have this question. Like, I should actually thank you for your excellent presentation. My question is not actually related to activism and into your purview area. So it's like that we generally see that city actually uh, unshackle us from the rigidity of small town and villages. Okay, and there are different kind of spaces where queer bodies come, they mingle with each other and build a community building. That is well and fine. But when we see village spaces, it is generally being perceived that, okay, it is a kind of claustrophobic foreclosure that isolate queer bodies. So for example, if we take the cartographic study in movies or say in literature, we often see that there are distinct symbolic sites which are very, very highly homoerotic and homosocial also. So don't you think that research should actually try to focus the good side of rustic spaces or say the village spaces also? And from my own personal experience, like I have done my research on the loneliness of closeted bisexual men. So I have been to many village area where the wife of a married gay bisexual man says that कि मेरा मर्द अगर किसी औरत के साथ रिश्ता बनाता है तो मैं उसका खून कर डालूंगी. But if he is maintaining a relationship with a boy or a guy, then it is well and fine. So how you actually see this critical trajectory? So my question to you is this. I'm very, very curious to know your standpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. And when we talk about the queer body and finding space and all, we try to navigate in our own way. And then when we talk about the rural area also, and I would like to say here that I am taking up a research project now. I am doing the research project, which is part of the Zuban research grant, and this I am just exploring and researching around queer lives in rural area. And talking about rural Assam and how in different institute or different agency or different spaces, especially cultural spaces, you find queer resilience, or you can embrace your queerness. And I see it's a very, in cultural spaces, and how you are finding, maybe in some dance drama or maybe in some folk festival or something like that, and how you were finding. So this is very much related to that, and people actually can make their space and build a space, or just can be themselves in that sense. And there people have amazing stories about their embracing queerness in rural area. It's not just that ki bichara ban ke hamesha hai. Just say cishet people always look at the Hijra community or Kinder community as the bichara ki dukh bhari kahani always, but there is queer joy, there is trans joy in our life, in different sense or different way, and how we see in our queer joy and trans joy. So this is also there. In rural area also it's there. But when you talked about the bisexuality, that's pretty satatmak problem, na? So you can keep, but then your wife cannot go. And this not only rural area, it's everywhere. How many people I have met in city area and everywhere, and people in position of power from education background and everything. So I do not want to make any personalized stand here about this kind of case or this kind of thing. It's any general thing. It can be with any cishet people also. A cishet couple, they might have affairs, and तभी बोल सकता है कि मैं रख सकती हूँ, तुम रखेगा तो आप तुमको खून कर देगा. So I will not really look at it in a very personalized, talking about just because they are bisexual, they are coming with a bisexual tag. It can be with any sexuality and any sexual orientation woman. It's just how they are looking at their madambi and how they want to do it. So yeah, thank you, Victor, for asking. Yeah.
No, it's actually like that. I'm saying that generally we see that, okay, the boundary of patriarchy in village space is quite evident. But in exceptional cases, you will also see that it is the women who are actually subverting the patriarchal boundary, because they will allow their spouse to have a homoerotic or say a homosocial relationship. But if the embodiment of women is coming into their personal domestic space, they take a resentment that, okay, their power position is being subverted, so I'm not going to tolerate it. So these kind of actually some interesting narrative also come from the different geographical locations of the Indian village that we should really
I'm
try.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Thank you, Victor.
Yeah. There are two more questions, and I think,
Yeah, I think I saw one question in the chat box.
Yeah. And the same
true.
question is now in Q&A also. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, copy.
Anna ji, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes, sure. Thank you once again. Thank you so much, Rituparna ji, for that very excellent talk. I mean, it really took us all back to the ground level and the root level realities that we face, right? And the different kind of actions that we took. I'm from an education background and I work as an assistant professor. So my question is more, selfish that way. Could you throw a little bit more light on the different kind of programs that you do with colleges and universities? The reason I ask is because we also do run courses on gendered history. I take a course on gendered history. We take up workshops and things like that. So I'm just more interested into knowing the different kind of programs that you have undertaken. You did speak about some, but I'm more interested to know a little bit more if you could.
Thank you. Thank you. So with colleges, it's mostly, addressing the college student around gender and sexuality, rights of LGBTQIA community. This kind of program we go and organize. But slowly, once we have built a relationship and all, now we are going more into deeper programs. For example, UGC has guideline to colleges that they should have gender champion club in college, where students needs to get involved in action for gender. So we are trying to enable the colleges ki you come forward and initiate gender champion club within your college, where we will mentor your gender champions. We will help the gender champions, and through which we are trying to build youth exchange program, where our collective members who are young leaders, they go and they train up the gender champion club members, because it's a very beautiful program. For example, if our 5 of our leaders are going, if there are 10 gender champion club member, 10 or 5 union member, and 10 or 15 in general students who are actually interested, a 30 group of people, you are extensively giving training, maybe for 1 day, maybe for 2 days, or maybe for 3 days. And for maybe 3 years, you are envisioning that they are going to take up actions in their colleges, through which you can actually build gender sensitive campuses. Because it is all the gender sensitive campus ideas, it should not be just restricted in Delhi University campuses. No, our colleges also in rural area and everywhere, everyone has to feel safe. So how we are building the narrative, क्योंकि नहीं पता है हमारे बच्चे को यहाँ पे gender के बारे में, they really do not know, they really do not understand. We have to hold their hand, we have to train them, we have to make them understand. So this is how. So one is gender champion club, how we are enabling, and so far in 3 or 4 colleges we have initiated gender champion club. Recently in this school college we organized one youth exchange program, and there and from our side we do not invest any resource and money. We are very clear that we are not going to invest one single penny also. It's your responsibility, because you are the college, you are the university, you bring money. So you give us resource person fee and then food and everything. So we are very clear. And then this month last only, one other college in Upper Mossasam, they are going to organize another youth exchange program. So this is one thing. Also, we have the summer school kind of programs and different trainings from where we take up college students who come forward and they take participate, and we see them as the leaders who will go and who will take up more action. Also, another program which I guess posts have talked about it yesterday, no more holding my peak, that our campaign to have gender neutral washrooms in colleges and university. Now with colleges, we are advocating about that also. And so for 4 colleges they initiated, and 1 college we are in talk with them, and then we will reach out to some government because we have these examples. So this kind of work we are actually trying to do with colleges. Also, another thing I would say, one gateway how we could get into the college, UGC refresher course, because there were 2 UGC refresher courses Bharat University organized, and I was invited to the resource person. This is how also it helped me to build relationship with college assistant professors. So this is how we can do this. So yeah, thank you. I think
thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
think that other 2 questions can you answer in chat box. One, Trupti Bal wanted
Yes.
in what way they can contribute to the movement. And
Yes.
second one is about the rural and urban special difference play in the role of healthcare and accessible for trans persons. I think the next resource person, Dr. Aksa, she's exactly working about that. She has also created a WhatsApp group of healthcare specialists who would work for the. So I think that will be covered there, but still you can answer in the chat box. Thank you very much. Extremely exciting and illuminating session that we had. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
We are profoundly grateful for your valuable input, Rituparna ji, and thank you for your distinguished presence and invaluable contributions. Thank you once again. Moving forward, I would request Dr. Aksa Sheikh to start the session. Dr. Aksa Sheikh is Associate Professor, Community Management, Hamdard Institute of Medical Sciences and Research, New Delhi. Dr. Sheikh will be taking the session on healthcare of transgender and non-binary persons. Yes, over to you, Dr. Sheikh.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope these slides are visible and my audio is also clear.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So, first of all, thank you to the organizers for having me over here for this very interactive exercise. I could join some time back and was really thrilled to look at the engaging conversations that the group was having, and that really showed that there were experts on both sides, not just in terms of the facilitator, but also the participants. They came with their own experiences, and I think that will only make this program very enriching. I also went through the recording of the previous day's proceedings, and it was really nice to know that the basics of trans identities have been covered, and that will really make my job easier. As most of you would have checked, I'll be speaking more from the perspective of health needs of the transgender community. Trying to keep it simple right now, just to do a little sensitization. And naturally, if you want to understand more about health aspects of transgender persons, then we'll also let you know how that can be done in terms of future interactive sessions. Now, what happens is generally, when we speak about the transgender community, a lot of us are afraid of transgender persons, and that included me also as a child. My mother used to always scare me by saying that, oh, you should not go out, otherwise these trans people are going to kidnap you and they're going to sell you off or something like that. And that's why there has been a phobia in our mind, or sometimes we don't understand. The media depictions are very cruel. And all of that leads to a lot of biases that come in this society, and these biases then also creep into the healthcare professionals who are also part and parcel of this society. And there's this very important quote that I want to share, which says that, what we fear, what we don't understand, we start fearing. And I think the trans community is one such community that many of us do not understand, and therefore we are afraid of them. We start judging them evil, we try to control them, and then it only converts into transphobia or attacking trans persons, sometimes which can also cost them their lives. Now, when we speak about transgender persons today over here, I want you to remember these images and understand whom are we talking about. So this is, of course, a very common perception of who transgender persons are. These are trans women who come from mostly Kinner community or various other socio-ethnic identities. They are involved in various traditional professions, and that's how we identify trans persons as. But a lot of time when we are speaking about transgender people, we forget that there are also transgender men or trans mask people who are present. Sometimes we forget that transgender umbrella also includes people who may be gender queer, who may be gender non-conforming, may not identify into the binaries again of trans femme or trans mask. And therefore, when we speak about healthcare experiences, we should be mindful of the variety and the diversity which is present within the trans community itself. Quick stats on the status of the trans population. How many trans people are there in India? To be honest, I don't have an answer to that. The last official count of so-called transgender people, I'm not really sure if they use the correct definition to calculate that in the census, was 4.87 lakhs. And naturally, the parameter that they measured in terms of literacy was much lesser than the national average of men and women. We all know that trans people often get bullied in childhood, they get abused, mistreated, and as a result of which they do not have equal access to basic opportunities like school education as compared to cisgender people. And that is why when it comes to trans folks, they are often lacking in education and employment opportunities and also in the healthcare facilities. We know that a lot of socio-ethnic groups like in Hijra communities are involved in traditional professions like badhai, which is sometimes misconstrued as begging or even extortion by some people. Some of them are also involved in sex work. And then you also have people who are performers who play music, dance on happy occasions like birthdays, opening of any new shops or weddings, and that's how they earn. Now, there has been a very important landmark change that happened in India, and that was the Nalsa versus the Union of India judgment, in which the first time the Indian judiciary, the Supreme Court, recognized transgender people as a separate gender identity, as against the previous understanding and recognition of only men and women. It also talked about providing empowering measures like in education, employment, softly even on reservation, healthcare access, etc. Then these are some more landmark events that followed after the Nalsa judgment, and that included in 2018, the Indian Psychiatric Society's position statement stating that homosexuality or transness is not a disease. Of course, it had been a consensus statement nearly 50 years back by the American Psychiatric Association, but in India, it was reiterated in 2018 during the, or just prior to the court case on Section 377. Then in 2018, of course, the Section 377 was read down, and homosexuality between two consenting adults of any sex didn't become a crime any longer. And that also had impact on transgender community. Then in 2019, the central government brought in the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act after tweaking the previous versions of the bill, which were more problematic. And in 2020, when a lot of us were busy with washing hands during the first wave of the COVID pandemic, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights rules came with almost no community consultation. In 2021, convergent therapy, which is also known as aversion therapy, and that has been used legitimately by many psychiatrists and other healthcare professionals to kind of convert gay folks or trans folks into straight folks, had been used. It's unscientific, it's abusive, traumatic. And in 2021, we can say that it was banned in a way. Now, what I mean by banned in a way is because there was a directive by the Madras High Court, and following that, the National Medical Commission, which regulates the modern medical sciences in India, said that it will be counted as a professional misconduct if an allopathic doctor is practicing it. In 2022, the health insurance for transgender persons was launched, which is the Ayushman Bharat TG Plus card scheme, which gives transgender people a premium of a cover of around 5 lakhs. And also for gender affirming surgeries. Also in 2022, the MTP Act was read to include women, which is mentioned in MTP Act, to include people of all genders, including trans persons and non-binary persons. And 2023 is going on, and there are many other developments that are happening, about which, of course, you are following. One of them also includes the right to marriage. Now, this is a very important thing to understand, that when it comes to talking about healthcare, especially in the medical curriculum, and how problematic that curriculum is in terms of its queerphobia and transphobia, the lead was taken through the petitions that were filed in courts by the community members, and that includes Madras High Court and Kerala High Court specifically. And then they gave out a series of recommendations and orders to the various bodies. And as a result of which, as you may have heard, that the National Medical Commission revised its curricula in 2 subjects, forensic medicine and psychiatry. It removed certain terms like sodomy and lesbianism. They were no longer classified as unnatural sexual offenses, and also brought in queer affirmative medical competencies into its fold. This is how the Madras High Court order helped say that convergent therapy will be a professional misconduct, and there will be, of course, consequences by the professional bodies if someone does it. Of course, there's no central act saying that convergent therapy is to be banned. But there was this very disheartening update which took place, as you may be knowing, that trans people, men who have sex with men, and certain other higher risk groups to HIV, like injecting drug users, are not allowed to donate blood. They are what is called as permanent deferment from donating blood. And even in 2023, when you do have a lot of measures by which through technology and through even epidemiological evidences, it's clear that there's no point in stopping trans people who are not at higher risk of HIV from donating blood. The government not just continues with the practice, but also defends that in the court of law, saying that what we are doing is right and scientific. The case is still sub judice, and we hope that something good comes out from that. But then this is an example of how there's systematic through government channels discrimination against trans and queer folks in healthcare setup. Now, having understood this legal, social, political background, now let us understand this. Can I say this, that trans people have the same needs as everyone else as human beings? Well, that will sound emotionally right, but when it comes to scientific evidence, we know that actually trans persons have a higher need of healthcare. We are not talking about equality here, we are talking about equity here. And when it comes to equity, we know that trans persons are one of the most marginalized groups in the country, especially on the healthcare front. And they actually have a higher need of healthcare. And it is not their transness which is responsible for that. That's not the causative factor. It's how the society is treating them, and also because of certain other medical factors that will be involved. So this is a gist of why I say that trans people have a higher need for healthcare. We know that when it comes to the prevalence and incidence of certain psychiatric conditions, the incidence is higher amongst trans people. That includes, of course, depression and anxiety disorders, and it also includes suicidal ideation and attempt. Unfortunately, we do not have very systematic and representative data when it comes to trans folks from India. But when you look at the data from many other countries, there is evidence that the suicidal attempt of trans persons is 40 times higher. It's not 40%, it is 40 times higher as compared to cisgender folks. We also know that the prevalence of harmful substance abuse is more in transgender people. And again, there are many socio-demographic economic factors which are responsible for it. When it comes to self-medication with medicines, including over-the-counter drugs, prescription drugs, and even hormone therapy, that's quite high, especially amongst trans women. When it comes to menstrual disorders, in people who have menstruating functions and who are not on hormones or operated upon, often these trans-masked people or non-binary people find it very difficult to go to a gynecologist who only treats women and talk about their menstrual problems. And there are also issues in terms of changing the absorbent materials or pads or other things that they may be using. There's also increased risk of STI and HIV because of the power dynamics, the lack of bargaining power, sometimes the more riskier routes of sex being selected, etc., by trans persons. There's also, now while we speak about infectious diseases, there's also an increased risk of non-communicable diseases and cancers, because these are, many of them do have lifestyle related risk factors like diet, stress, lack of exercise, lack of screening facilities. We also know that trans people may need gender affirmation services that can involve taking externally hormones or undergoing certain medical procedures. Trans folks have lesser access to preventive healthcare, which can be as simple as vaccine for COVID-19, or it can be something like mammography for breast cancer or a pap smear for cervical cancer. When it comes to insurance coverage, we know that most of the trans folks come from the economically poorer sections. They also come, when they have money, they may not have access to the insurance coverage or other official forms of insurance which are provided like in workplace or through spousal benefits, etc. There is often lack of family and friend support, which is what is very important in getting better from illnesses, as all of you will agree. And lastly, this poor awareness and affordability of these services. And a combination of all these factors, ensures that the trans people most of the times have a higher need of healthcare, but it is not available to them simultaneously. Sorry if that photo is triggering to some people, but I also wanted to show how trans bodies look, and we should normalize this. Because this is what happens, when I, as a doctor, I'm sitting in the OPD, a patient comes to me with pneumonia, let's say, or comes to me with any respiratory illness, and I want to auscultate them, and I tell them to take their shirt off so that I can auscultate them better, and I get to see something like this. Now, what happens is all my history and clinical examination and all my concerns about pneumonia are sidelined, and as a doctor, I'm obsessed with why there is a scar like this. I want to know what is the history behind this. And then I discover that this is a trans man. And then everything, starts to get biased according to that. So when it comes to barriers, a lot of trans people do not go to the healthcare systems or to the doctors because there is stigma and discrimination. There are body image issues. I'm like, if I go to a doctor and if they see this, then they'll be asking me a lot of questions, and therefore I don't want to. I may have past negative experiences of myself or of someone known to me who went into the healthcare system and faced certain types of abuse or neglect. There may be barriers in terms of availability, affordability, and quality, and also very important is decision making. Many of the trans people do live with their family members, and it's the abusive families who are often taking decisions for them, including decisions for healthcare. Like, for example, if I'm a trans person who is staying with my family and wants to go to a psychiatrist because I think there's something off, my mood is not good and I need to go to a psychiatrist, my parents are going to tell me, oh, no, you're not mad. You just need to focus more on your studies. You are not a woman. This is all just a thought. Get married, you'll feel better. I'm not even able to go to a psychiatrist. So decision making may be difficult. There are people who are within the Gharana systems, and they may not really have the power to make certain decisions of whether to go to a doctor or not to go to a doctor. So one has to understand that many a times, even if there is access in terms of availability or affordability, sometimes there may be self-discrimination, there may be decision-making issues, there may be self-stigma also present, which may prevent a person from going. Then there are barriers, of course, in the healthcare system, which has been designed only thinking, I would say, of the male gender predominantly, and to some extent, the binary identity of sexes and genders. But when it comes to thinking about that a patient could also be a trans or a non-binary person, of course, that imagination is not there when we are designing the system. So just to give examples, there can be lack of availability of services, accessibility to those services, affordability and quality. And I'll just explain this using one simple example: gender affirming surgery, which is also called as sex change surgery. So if I, as a trans woman, wants to undergo gender affirming surgery in India, I'll think, okay, which is the best hospital where I should go? And quickly the answer is, okay, it is, of course, AIIMS New Delhi. That has to be the best hospital in India, where the best of the best surgeries happen. So let me go to AIIMS hospital. I go to AIIMS and I realize that the gender affirming services are not available. The endocrinologist there is not providing hormone therapy. They are not doing surgeries, right? I go to accessibility, I realize that there are only male and women queues and washrooms and wards, and there is no concept of a third gender ward. AIIMS, of course, has a unigender ward. Then when it comes to affordability, then where do I go? I'm like, okay, let me go to Fortis, let me go to Apollo and try doing surgery over there, which will cost me anywhere between 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs. A gender affirming surgery is more expensive than cardiac surgery in India. Or I may go to Thailand and go through visa hassles and pay millions of rupees for my surgery. And what about quality? There are many people who are literally quacks when it comes to gender affirming surgery. They do not have the requisite skills, but since they know that there's a lot of demand, they're performing these surgeries. Something as simple as breast implants, which can be done by a professionally qualified surgeon, but since they are not providing it, many trans people go to doctors who are not even MBBS doctors to get the breast implants done at a cheaper cost. And then the surgeries are botched up, they are done for a few hours, the person is discharged, and there are many consequences. And I'm sure you've heard of stories of how some trans people have even lost their lives in these procedures. Then there's lack of sensitization. There's often a very naive curiosity when you go to a doctor who does not know about trans folks. They are like, oh, how, why? And they're like, constantly asking you questions, but you went there because you had loose motions. But this doctor is talking about, oh, aap bachpan se hi aise the ya baad mein jaake aapko pata laga, and they don't even know whether you are an intersex or a transgender person. There's, of course, lack of competence when it comes to MBBS doctors or nurses or rehab professionals or anyone, because it's not there in the curriculum, So there's a need for that, and there's lack of SOPs. the well-trained surgeons are doing a lot of experimentation when it comes to transgender surgeries in India. And as a result of which, you have these either very ambitious, ridiculously ambitious surgeries like uterus transplant, which is being planned, or there are people who are not even able to get a breast augmentation surgery. Now, this is something, having understood the systems and the systematic barriers which people face, many of you may be wondering, oh my God, this is such an uphill task, and what can we do to make the healthcare access of the transgender persons better? And I will say this, that something very important is to get sensitized and to start small. Of course, you cannot do everything, but whatever small thing that you can do, which can be as simple as reading up about it, which can be as simple as next time when you go to a hospital, asking where is the queue for transgender persons, where is the washroom for the transgender persons, where is the ward for the transgender persons, can be very paradigm shifting in its own sense. Now, here are certain solutions that I propose on making our systems better, and that includes decriminalizing transness, depathologizing, that means no longer considering it as a disease, and demedicalizing also transness. As many of you may be knowing that during the British times, we had Criminal Tribes Act. And under that, trans people were considered as criminal tribes, and they could be arrested even if they had not done anything, which later on was converted into habitual offenders. And even today, we see that when it comes to the law enforcement agencies, the interactions with trans persons can be very brutal, violent, problematic. So it's very important to, when I say decriminalization, it's not just about Section 377, but also decriminalizing in the attitudes of the law enforcement agencies. You also have depathologization, that's very important, and that's happening by not considering trans people as a disease. Unfortunately, it was, or fortunately, I don't know, it was the HIV pandemic which brought the focus to the trans, gay, MSM community. But unfortunately, a lot of people still associate trans people with HIV. That is what we see during the blood donation guidelines also. And third very important thing is to demedicalize, to understand that transness is not only if I'm taking hormones. I'm not a complete trans only if I get a surgery done, only if I become from man to woman or woman to man. Transness is an experience, it's identity. And let's not only talk about hormones, surgeries, or medical procedures to define transness of a trans person. And one example of this is the surgeries on intersex people, which has been done. Just as we say that the gender is not binary, sexes are also not binary, right? And people can be male sex, female sex, or intersex variations. And there are more than 30 intersex variations that are present. Unfortunately, many of us are obsessed with boxing people only into male or a female sex. That is why when a child with intersex variations is born, the parents are eager, that something should be done so that this child can be converted into a male child or a female child. And under this concern, sometimes surgeries are being done on intersex children, which were not needed medically, right? And these surgeries are often done and naturally without their consent. They can be scarring, they can have painful consequences later on. And of course, it is like, being let down when these intersex people become adults and realize that their bodies have been mutilated upon during childhood by none other than their own family members. It's very important that as we speak about universal healthcare, as we speak about health for all, we should not forget trans and gender diverse individuals at every level, right from a PHC to a tertiary care center. In the essential healthcare that we speak about, which is the healthcare that the government needs to provide to everyone, we need to ensure that the gender identity is also included as a running theme. It's important to understand that when we speak about gender affirming surgeries, that has to be provided by the government as mandated under the Act, and not just left off to private providers under the guise of insurance. When we speak about trans folks, mental health care is very, very important. And we do have a legislation for mental health in India, but unfortunately, it is not cognizant of gender identities. And it's important that that is also taken into consideration so that the lack of access that trans people have to acceptable and queer affirmative mental health care is taken care of. There has to be competent healthcare. Only emotions that I'm concerned about trans people and I want to help them won't suffice. You also need knowledge and skills to provide those healthcare services. And therefore, there is a need for change in healthcare curriculum. And I don't only mean medical curriculum here. We also talk about changes in nursing curriculum, in curriculum of rehab professionals, including psychologists, in the curricula of paramedical workers also. We also need continuing medical education, because when you change the curriculum, you can only bring about changes in future. But what about the healthcare professionals who are already out there and practicing? So for them, it's very important that there's continuing medical education. And lastly, very importantly, our healthcare policy must be cognizant, must take into consideration the trans people and include them also. This is just one small example that I'm using of the work that we are doing with the trans people and how we are saying that everything that we do for trans people must include us. This case study was published today by Sabin Vaccine Institute, and this is featuring one of our work that we do at Sangat India, looking at structural inequities in COVID-19 vaccine access and uptake amongst the transgender and disability communities in India. And it was a qualitative study that involved community-based participatory research method and also photo voice stories method. Through this study, we have been able to point out the gaps in vaccine policies and practice, and suggested certain measures. But very important thing that I want to mention here is that this was not a top-down approach which happened. This evolved with the community, through the community, and we have been very mindful of the fact that we don't want to preach or we don't want to do research on the communities. We want to do research with the communities, and where the communities are given more and more power, and the usual structure of researcher and research is broken down. Why I mention this is because as we are trying to reform the healthcare access for transgender persons, it's very important to have research, but that research has to be trans affirmative, it has to be queer affirmative, it has to be done with the community. And this is just one example that is there. I'll share this resource of the case study, which can be used as the study material with the participants later on. And lastly, and very important thing, I'm really happy that in this program, the concerns of the trans community, the problems of the trans community, the joys of the trans community are spoken by the trans community themselves. There's a lot of, I would say, space created for us and mic being given to us, and our voices are being amplified. And this is something very important principle that we say when we are talking about work with the marginalized communities, that nothing about us without this. Yes, there is problem in the healthcare system, but we do not want someone who does not understand us, who does not have the lived experience like us to talk about reform. We want people from the community to talk about reforms. And therefore, they must be involved at every stage, right from planning to implementation to evaluation. This is the last slide, and I'll stop here because I felt that the audience is highly interested in questions. So I'm all geared up to get your questions and also hear from your own experiences. So I'll stop over here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We are profoundly grateful for your extraordinary presence and the depth of wisdom you shared. Thank you for enriching the session in the most extraordinary way possible, ma'am. So I'll be requesting Professor Vibhuti Patel to provide her remarks, and then we'll be moving forward with the next session. Dr. Aksa, ma'am, we would request you to answer the questions in the Q&A box, given the paucity of time.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Vibhuti ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Aksha Sheikh, for a mind-blowing session, and the way you did demystification of so much that is existing about trans body and trans people's problems in a very lucid style. We are familiar with your articles in Indian Express, this edit page, and the inclusive approach that you have adopted, even in the WhatsApp group that you have created, Doctors for Trans Folk and Twitterati Against Hate. I think where even social scientists you are allowing. So I think that whole hierarchy of knowledge where the medical professionals have chip on their shoulder and they think that social scientists and all, they are good for nothing. I think that barrier also you have broken. Your case studies are extremely important because they are based on personal experiences, and also your observation, your statement about naive curiosity among doctors, which we have also witnessed during the pandemic, the kind of insensitivity and crudeness with which they responded to trans community that is there. Your suggestion of curriculum, gender inclusive and curriculum revision, it's extremely important. And you say it's not only medical curriculum, but also nursing and psychology. And also, I think it's in social science and foundation course, I think we need to have this thing, because every time I go for gender sensitization session and start talking about trans people, they just, all the bureaucrats, they would just dismiss it as saying, oh, but they represent only 4+ lakhs. No, they are not. So, but we don't talk about like the Sikhs or Christians who also are less than 2% of population. No, so but this insensitivity has to go. And your painful recitation of, I think, uterus transplant, menstruation hygiene, we also saw during the pandemic that they were not ready to distribute pads to the transgender community. So I think it's a very lot of work has to be done. And I think you have opened our eyes. And again, like the previous speaker, you also have a very inclusive approach, which I found very inspiring. And your participatory action research, where you are talking that you are not researching others, but you are researching with the people and the shared community and the shared knowledge and the social accountability that we as researchers have. I think that is a very, very well taken thing. And we have learned a lot from your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Axel.
Thank you, ma'am, for those remarks. And it's really very nice to be over here. I look forward to more interactions, and I'll answer the questions in Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think everyone's free to ask their questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be moving forward to the next session. Once again, thank you, Vibhuti ma'am. So yeah, we're moving forward. I would request Aru Akunji to start the session. Akunji is a writer and a performer. He'll be taking the session on anti-caste theories on gender. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Samriddhi, and folks at IMPRI for having me. It's really like a full circle moment of me for thoughts, because both of my professors, Professor Vibhuti, who I've attended the course of in my time in TIS, and Professor Vikramaditya Sahaya are in audience, who taught me in Ambedkar University. So I'm really at a loss of word as to what I could offer to the class today. But as is true for most Dalit students, will tell you, we learn as much outside the university as we do inside them. And today, actually, I've focused the session on friendships I made outside the university, which helped me survive in the university, because universities were quite unsurvivable for me. And continue to be so. My today's session is more like, I would like at least 5 minutes to answer questions and respond to people, because I feel like the topic demands that. The topic is explorative, right? So I want to think of what an anti-caste theory on gender could be, rather than take you back to a Sharmila Rege and so on, because I approach theory from a Dalit queer practice, which is to say that we understand when we say that we are Dalit queer, there's a bunch of things to contextualize. One is that it is an interdisciplinary approach. From where I see it, it's also a study of inequality in society, both from Dalit and queer perspectives and to bring them together. Sometimes they come together neatly, sometimes they don't. Sometimes one exacerbates the other, and that is how inequality works. It's complex, it's compounded, and it is cutting across space and time. So that's one. And so when one is saying that we are trying to understand as Dalit queers how the society works, one is trying to capture this, what is this unique vantage point which cannot be achieved from other positions in the society, because a caste society inherently is also a patriarchal and a heteronormative society. So I'm going to be talking about some of the tools that Dalit queer people have deployed in sort of this interrogation of theirs. And I'm going to talk about some of the scholars whose readings I have shared with you, which again is such a pleasure because it's my first class talking about both of their writings. And 5 years ago, we didn't even have those writings. So this is also shows like how fast, despite all odds, some discourses can develop. And I'm just looking at my notes and seeing if there's anything else that I have missed. No, pretty much it. And when I'm talking about like what castes works together with and so on, it's also applied to, so for example, theoretical concepts, right? So for example, a lot of literature around passing was originally around trans people, but so for example, in US, later it went to racialized folks as well. And now you see it within Dalit writings as well, right? So passing is this concept where somebody can either somebody can not conform to the identity that the society prescribes to them or thinks that they belong to. And a very interesting way in which one of the Dalit autobiographers subverted this is, their name is Yashika Dutt, and they came out with a book saying coming out as a Dalit, right? So generally coming out is also associated with queers. Why is it that Dalit people feel the need to come out, and what are the kind of erasures in which this coming out is built, right? So using a concept actually meant for one thing, for one identity with the other, which of course, all of those who know about the EWS quota and the queer people asking for reservation know quite really well how when it comes to politically contested rights and so on, something which was originally meant for and opposed violently and still is not implemented, which was reservations for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Now everybody wants a piece of that pie because they see the merit in affirmative action. First things first, I have shared 2 readings, and one of them is by Dhrubajyoti, who has built, and also, like the reason I shared these readings is not because they are just my friends, philosopher guides. I really find their work really interesting because all 3 of these people, which is Dhrubajyoti, who works as a journalist, and Akhil Kank, who works as an anthropologist and has a history in law, and Dhiren Boresa, who's a geographer, is an urban geographer, is touching around caste and queerness in very different ways. They are poking it in very different ways. And it also shows the kind of pressures that they are in because they are in different departments and, trying in different disciplines, wrestling with them. And so, for example, Dhrubajyoti, even though they are a journalist, over the 10 years or so in Hindustan Times, they end up developing an archive of every time a Dalit trans person contests anything, right? They contest a ward election, they contest a panchayat election, and so on. And these are Dalit trans people, mind you, who have nothing common with each other. The parties they are contesting from have nothing to cater to them, to give them. And sometimes they're also contesting independently. But what you would find common across all those pieces is that sanitation is always an agenda for them when they are contesting. Access to education is always an agenda for them. For them, it is inherent that they want both Dalit and trans people to access these things, which a lot of the urban elite or urban people like me take for granted. And that is a very interesting ethnography to build. Like you're a journalist, you could report on 10,000 things, but Thrubo has been able to build that archive for us. And they have I'm guessing like it would not be a similar archive if it were not them doing that kind of work and bringing that kind of care. So what I have shared is a letter that they wrote to their lover, which was published in a Penguin book, which is an autoethnographic writing. It's an example of autoethnographic writing. The other reading I have shared is Akhil Kang's work, which is about Brahmin men who like to rim. And for those of you who don't know what rimming is, rimming means the act of eating ass or pleasuring a lover by, uh, eating ass. I don't know how to, yeah, put it academically. I should have thought more about it. But anywho, Akhil's work is also so important because there's so much conversation about in anthropology of mapping, like how easy it is to go to people who are homeless, stateless, who are in certain ways disprivileged by class and language and social status. But you almost find nothing or very little for the sections which have upward mobility or which are coming from the upward sections of the society. So I think Akhil's work is so integral because they have actually walked the talk and are building an ethnography of upper caste people. And the challenges are completely reversed then, right? Because if you want to talk to upper caste people about their casteist behaviors and so on, uh, it's not a very welcoming conversation. Caste in general is not a welcoming conversation, and there's a lot of literature on how caste works as an erasure, and this vacuum of not talking about caste in itself is what sustains it, right? And so hence Akhil's work is an ethnography of the upper castes. And something about Dhiren's work which struck me, which is also so interesting, is because they're an urban geographer. Their work is a lot around desire and how desire, moves around the city. So how places for rest, to get intimate, to access privacy, sanitation, get crunched for some publics, right? And who are these publics for whom it gets crunched for? Why is it that the Dalit bastis, which are often running the inner side of the city, are outside the city, right? Why is it that sometimes also the Hijra Basti also happens to be neighboring the Dalit Basti, right? So these are the questions that these people are asking. But largely within Dalit queer scholarship also, when, I mean, like, I'm also a bit worried because a lot of queer scholarship has to do with establishing humanity. I'm not sure how much one gains out of establishing humanity because we see humanity is, valued so less in our times. But I think what interests me in the queer scholarship is this kind of turning it around and making it for everyone, even though you exist outside it, outside the folds of it, outside the folds of whatever is it, in this case, the caste society, the caste patriarchal society. So the three ways of analysis which I see emerging in general within the Dalit queer activists and within the Dalit queer scholars, because there's always a dialogue within the Dalit queer community between those of us who are in academia and those of us who are not in academia. And that dialogue is very essential to our understanding of the society. And so the three kinds of analysis that I want to touch on through which one can try to understand caste and queerness is, the first is the historical analysis. So now the boring heterosexual historians will tell you that there is no whatever history or no valid history of queers or Dalits, or they will take you directly to Khajuraho or whatever. But you don't need Khajuraho to talk about history of caste and queerness, right? There are texts such as Manusmriti, where it would be a privilege to say that Manusmriti Manusmriti doesn't matter because high courts literally quote Manusmriti while defending a sexual assault of a minor, right? There is a Manu statue in front of another high court in Rajasthan and so on. So it's really a privilege to be able to say, oh, Manusmriti is a religious text, why are you examining it? But if you examine it and you realize if a woman is being punished for sleeping with a woman, and then at the same time you're supposed to pour oil into a Dalit person for learning, then you'll have to, as per Manusmriti, you'll have to kill Dalit queers twice, so you'll have to kill them twice as per the law, and that is what shapes the caste. And there's phenomenal work which Ambedkar has done on examining Manusmriti. And if anybody is imaginative about thinking about queerness, they would be very easily able to draw those connections between Manusmriti and casted heteronormative oppression that exists in our society. So one is through texts, the other is through oral histories. I feel oral histories are so important because so much of our movements are not written. And also, so another tool. Okay, now I'm going to add that another tool later because I was talking about 3 kinds of analysis, but I'll keep it in mind to add it. Actually, I want to introduce it here within historical analysis, but let me first talk about oral histories. Oral histories are so important because I also run an archive, which is completely run by Dalit students. It's called the Dalit Archives, and where we talk to different kinds of movement leaders and artists and so on. And that is where a conversation which is not supposedly about caste and queerness becomes about that, you know. When I am talking to the last surviving founding member of Dalit Panthers, and I ask them, hey, but what about the trans people? Where were they, you know? That is probably where you get the response also that, of course, trans people were there and we tried to bring them in, but it was really difficult because, you know, the bastis are constantly moving. It was a different time. We were really struggling to even get basic things like ration cards and so on. So that is through oral histories is where you build the movement. There are other precedents. For example, there was the first Hyderabad Pride, I think, was called the Swabhiman Yatra, which does not translate to pride. It translates to dignity. And historically, it is the anti-caste movements which have fought for dignity and self-respect. So Kanchai Laya, who's a towering anti-caste intellectual, came and inaugurated it. So oral histories to study movements is important. The reason I talk about this 4th thing, which I wasn't planning to in this historical analysis, is because it's related to how we imagine, think, and talk about time in our writing. And the tool I would use is the tool of speculation. You know, history is not only what was and what was written, but it is also the question that it is posing. You know, this is why also queer historians get a bad rep, because it goes against all the things that historical methods are made up of. But imagine if somebody's if you're a Dalit queer person and you're against really like unimaginative world, then who says that, for example, Ambedkar was a man, what did he do for queer people or whatever, you know, like divorcing him of his context, his times, his access to the kind of knowledge that was there and so on. You can argue with speculation that Ambedkar abolished untouchability. It is on the blueprint of Ambedkar's constitution that you have an affirmative action in place. And because of that, Dalit queer people like me have been able to achieve and articulate what we can. So which is why speculation is an important intellectual tool. And it's an important intellectual tool to poke at history and say, like, what is history, right? Whose history? Who is it validating? So that is the historical analysis bit. 2 other kinds of analysis I will want to touch on is the cultural analysis. Also, when I mention Akhil's work, it also deals a lot with psychoanalyzing the upper castes, because there's no other way. Like, Akhil can't ask a Brahmin person why they are eating ass and how that is related to their caste identity, and then, you know, connected to some data of 1,000 Brahmin men who were eating ass. It's not possible. So in that possibility, it's also, you know, it's important to acknowledge that as an anthropologist, they are also using psychoanalysis to reach their conclusions and what they're saying, to argue for what they're arguing. So the other kind of analysis I want to touch on is legal analysis. Intersectionality was actually a tool developed by Black feminists for legal analysis, right? So you know that you can only file under one case. Either you can file under a Nirbhaya Act in a case of a sexual assault, or you can do like a SC/ST thing. You know that you will get more compensation in Nirbhaya than compared to the SC/ST Act. And so in that way, you're privileging a non-casted report of sexual assaults over very casted gendered sexual violence. And so legal analysis is important to outline gaps like that. Like intersectionality as a tool, but there's a bunch of other ways in which caste and queerness, so far as we know, shows up within the legal frameworks, right? So one is this tussle between horizontal reservation. So Indian governments as of now wants that trans people be made some blanket category, which has never been done. It's never been done for women. It's never been done for the castes. It's never been done for people who have certain kind of economic criteria. Never been done for persons with disabilities. But trans people are an exception to that rule. And what activists like Grace Bano are arguing for is that the trans reservation must reflect the social identities that the trans people are coming from, because there are entitlements related to that social identities that trans people need to survive. So that's one example. The other example is that a lot of times when we are talking about civil rights for queer people, a lot of upper caste people are talking about bringing in laws against hate crimes and homophobic hate crimes and so on. But there is some study and evidence that Dalit trans queer people have historically used the Atrocities Act in cases of when they were being subjected to violence by upper caste people and so on. And so legally, their needs would be different than that of a person who's not protected by the Atrocities Act. I mean, like, who Atrocities Act actually protects is a different conversation. But there is evidence to support this. And of course, last but not the least, Aksa already touched on it, which is that similar to the Criminal Stripes Act, there were also UNOC acts in some states which criminalize both ethnic gender minorities and also casted communities and tribal communities and nomadic communities and so on. So legal analysis also allows us to see like who's at the center, right? Who is the judiciary made up of? Like many of you might know as students that Supreme Court only has a certain caste makeup. Supreme Court also has a very specific gender makeup, right? But it is relating to what laws exist. It's not existing by itself in vacuum. Last but not the least, and which I find really interesting and powerful, is the cultural analysis. Even though I'm constantly thinking, how did queer people end up in culture wars, so as to say, there are many answers to it. But I think one of them has to do with us being seen as symbols rather than being regular, you know. And when you're saying symbol, everybody cannot be symbol. So it's actually heterosexuals' way of acknowledging that they treat us as surplus bodies, right? So we are not the average person that you either give birth to or marry or have kinship with, and so on. So the cultural analysis can be looked at many things. So originally, the three of these philosophers, thinkers, scholars, which I talked about, in 2015 did a Pride speech, which said that, you know, Pride is a very casted place. And of course, 8 years later, everybody has become intersectional and woke and whatnot. But it still remains that prides are still casted spaces. Many of them specifically bring in rules to curb any kind of dissent or politicization or organizing. It still remains true that prides are a neoliberal formation and way of organizing in India. They're extremely capitalist. Like many pride communities consist of only people who want to give awards to each other rather than investing in structural growth, such as, you know, having shelter homes, scholarships, jobs, and so on. So that still remains a problem. For a upper caste person, maybe drag is something they do in Kitisu, but Kitisu is one of these very queer clubs. I don't know what the audience I'm talking to, so I'm also holding back on my criticism. But basically, a lot of people associate drag with, you know, certain kind of clothing and makeup and so on. But those of us who come from casted communities know that casted communities have been subjected to this kind of, you know, that we have to entertain the upper castes. And so many, they, you know, like heteros call them Dalit men, we call them, we don't, you know, Dalit people who performed, and we don't know what their gender identities were, because they were performing as women and they lived a big part of their lives as women through traditional theater such as tamasha and nach and so on. Shelja Payak has done great work on it, but with largely Dalit cis women, which you guys can read. It's called in a book called Vulgarity of Caste, I think. But I can also look back and send it before the next session begins. So looking at drag, looking at pride, there was this film which came out, which was a gay film. And then everybody was like, of course, you know, because that by then the understanding had come in that there's a pressure on even homosexual relationships, the portrayal of them to be somehow more whatever, like accessible or like, you know, representative and so on. So originally both the characters were supposed to be upper caste, but after backlash, they completely retconned one character's story and made him Lohar's son suddenly, so that people cannot, write it off in that way. And so examination of pop culture from that specific point of view, examination of things like pride, drag, dating apps, like how caste constantly shows up on dating apps, right? How dating apps, even if they have like 40 gender identities, still put you in a binary of who you want to swipe with and who you want to sleep with. They're not saying you are 30 identities. Do you want to sleep with 30 people? Do you want to sleep at all, and how, or whatever? So those are not the questions that dating apps are asking. And they are still very casted and deeply heterosexual and deeply criminalizing of trans people, right? Especially like the buck of dating apps stops at trans bodies, whether they are real or not, or at having sexual conversations, or if a trans person were to do sex work on dating apps and so on, that is where the progressiveness stops, right? It's not cute anymore. You can't do sex work away with like a rainbow on your app logo during Pride Month, right? That's pretty much it. That's all I had to share today. And if there are questions, I would love to answer.
Yeah. Thank you for such an enriching session. And also for sharing your valuable experience with us. Your vibrant energy and spunky contribution injected a needed dose of excitement and fun. Thank you once again. I would like to ask Professor Vibhuti Patel to provide her remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Aro. I have always supported all your campaigns. You were the leader to fight against Section 377 and also your signature campaigns. You're coming to this doing gender class and giving speeches. I really feel nostalgic. I think most important thing which I liked about you is you brought the very grounded issues and also the question of caste and the material reality, political economy that you brought in, and the day-to-day existential struggle. And I think that also I used to say about that what we need is a gender responsive budgeting, financially transformative policies, and also the quota in education, quota in skill programs, quota in employment, quota in housing. That is, I think, very important, and that we share in our roti or share in a pie of development or share in the chapati that Maharashtra got. I think what would be, I think these are the important issues, because identity, yes, we started yesterday, if you have seen 4 hours of discussion about identity. To start with, identity very important, but then we need to, if we want to bring transformative changes, then the issues which you discussed are extremely important. And one more thing I would like to add is also political participation becoming a constituency. You know that I do training on gender budgeting for the elected representatives. When I was in the villages of UP, the Dalit candidates who were elected, they say that, ma'am, before Mayawati ji came to power, the wages of the villagers were 1 lota of sugarcane. I will never forget that sentence. 1 lota of sugarcane was the wages for 12 hours a day. After she came to power, in all Dalit bastis, we got pakka houses, we got road, we got safe drinking water, so that the rape of women also reduced, because we did not have to go to the upper caste bastis for water. No, so I think in the final analysis, creating yourself as a political constituency is extremely important. The way 33% reservation for women, whatever you may say about initially as say them as a rubber stamp or a sarpanch pati, but things have changed after 6 rounds of election. So I think your very, very erudite and very powerful presentation, I think, leads us to what kind of pathways we want to have for future. Thank you. I'm so proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Given you wanted to answer the questions yourself, Arushi?
Yeah.
You want the questions. You wanted to answer them yourself, right?
Yeah, I think there's just 2 questions for me. The name of the movie, it's I think the only film which Ayushmann Khurrana did, where he's gay. You can Google it. I don't remember it because it's not a like it's not a film worth remembering. And the intersectional approach and problems of casteism within queer spaces. I mean, like I would say that like that's not that's not something I can answer for. But centering Dalit queer people and coming to them when their material needs are sort of looked at, then that's really supposed, because we are already putting in that work. I mean, we have existed despite the casteism within queer spaces.
Quite empowered.
Yeah, I would like to actually ask you something. First of all, thank you for your soul steering presentation, because I could also relate the different kind of discrimination that I have faced. So I just want to know that abjection has different trajectory, and abjection also comes with different deconstructive layer. So now actually, if we come into the digital spaces, for example, Grindr and Fluid, they are the cesspool that perpetuate normativity. And then the body of Dalit queer are being objectified as someone who can be fetishized and who can be exoticized. But when it comes into maintaining a good relationship, they are always being abjected. Now my position, sir, will be very, very different. But if I keep on critiquing this trajectory, I always get shunned, saying that, okay, you cannot be like this, why you are supporting this and that. And within our own queer ecosystem, we are so factionalized and divided, left versus right, center versus majority. Is there any solidarity left within us that actually think of attaining a firm ground of equality? Because I don't know, we keep on contesting about, okay, heterosexuality and heteronormativity actually decimate us, but within our own social position in the queer spectrum, we also get tormented and tortured on day-to-day basis. So how you will relate this dilemma and this different kind of complication that beleaguered within our own queer ecosystem?
Victor, I mean, if I got your question right, I don't know, but I definitely hear a lot of pain there. But I mean, like, I have learned over years to not come to social movements to be emancipated. I mean, it's ideal if some emancipation happens, but at the same time, any kind of queer imagination or a caste imagination is not emancipatory, right? Like ideally, we want to build a world which is not having caste, which is not having gender, where we don't have to ask these questions associated to gender and caste. And I have in my moments where I felt like you have felt, it was only friendship that I could hold on to, because friendship is such an interesting thing. It can become family, it can become lover. It's not reliant on me sleeping with certain people or earning for certain people for it to exist, right? So it's a very queer relationship, and is a relationship which constantly confounds me and sometimes also cripples me. But yeah, I hope that you can find similar friends who think similar things as you, and I mean, I hope that you guys create a better politics. That's all I can say. I don't have solutions.
I think non-threatening space, that's very important.
I think we have one more question, Aro. Ma'am, so there's a question, Maria. I think you've missed this one. Okay, so the question goes, is following an intersectional approach able to solve the problem of casteism within queer spaces, according to you? How can queer spaces be made more inclusive? That's the question.
The answer would be no, because intersectionality as a tool is not meant to reform society. I mean, not in that way, the way that we understand it, that we are all embodying and then hence we are all in intersectional spaces. We have always existed. There is a tension between anti-caste scholars, and I lean towards that tension in the way that I also feel that intersectionality is not the only way or not a foolproof way to understand anti-caste struggles. Anti-caste struggles predate it. The way that Dalit people have built literature and talked about things like self-respect and dignity is very different. Like their way of approaching the issue is very different than how intersectionality does. For example, the idea of self-respect is important because you are born without respect, right? So you decide your own self-respect. Whereas intersectionality is a framework which pushes towards equity by saying, okay, these are the sections which exist, these are the people who are falling through, and these are the people we need to bring together. I think the entry and exit points and the way that these theories are meant for are very different. But yes, if intersectional approach means that you can have a representative, representative democracy of sorts, then by all means, intersectionality can be the solution. But I don't think that was the intention of intersectionality when it was, like the way it was theorized.
Great. Thank you. We want to express our genuine gratitude for your participation in our session. Thank you once again. Moving forward, I would request Vikramaditya Sahayaji to start the session. Firstly, thank you for your patience, Sahayaji. And yeah, so Sahayaji is a teacher and researcher at the Center for Law and Policy Research, New Delhi. He'll be taking the session on the history of trans as gender. Over to you, sir.
Hi, sorry, I think I logged in without giving you camera access, so I guess you'll just have to bear with me and just hear me. I hope that's all right, because I think if I log into the meeting again, we'll waste time. But without further ado,
shall I share the link on your phone? Please check.
No, I'm not on my phone. I'm on my laptop. If you want me to leave the meeting and join again and you can wait for another minute, I can do it.
We can do that. Why not? Yes.
We can do it. Okay. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I can see Dr. Aksha answering the questions in the Q&A box. Guys can look into it once.
Yeah.
That's it.
And she can also, answer it on video, no? Yeah, no.
Right now,
Yeah.
yeah, the same goes for the other speakers. Yes.
Unmute yourself, Dr. Akshay, and you can answer. Yeah. Dr. Akshay, you can answer the question. You can unmute and speak. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see ma'am typing the answer, so I think she prefers typing. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I hope you can see me now.
Yeah.
No.
No, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
The device you can still try, you can go to the video, bottom left, then there you will see an up arrow.
yeah.
There you can see which camera are you choosing.
Okay, wait. Let me just do that. I'm really sorry. This was not really my intention to waste time. I'm just trying to.
You can check whether.
I just gave you permission.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. I'm sorry. Start video.
It's absolutely all right.
I honestly, I hope everyone's just taking a loo and a water break in the meanwhile.
Yes, that's it.
Hmm.
I think the device is not permitting camera.
Yeah,
Oh.
the device is not connected for some
Okay,
reason.
no problem. Go ahead.
I've also shared the link to your phone. You can, if you're not using slide, you can also use your phone for video.
Okay. No, my phone wouldn't have this much battery. Zoom generally eats up a lot of our batteries.
Correct.
So let me just
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but let me just kind of then maybe continue.
Yeah.
I assure you, I look freshly bathed. And I did prepare to look decent on camera. But I'm really, really grateful for making space for me in this very luminous lineup. Okay, let me just see. No, the camera isn't working.
No problem. Go ahead.
Just choose. Let me just a second. Integrated camera.
Is it a Mac?
No, this is a Dell laptop.
Then it should.
And it's saying integrated camera. It's not showing my phone camera. That's the problem. Sorry, my laptop camera.
Integrated camera should work.
Yeah, mine
Yeah,
is
but
also there. Dell only.
okay. I mean, that's what I did. But for some.
Then can you check video settings into that? Video settings at last.
Yeah.
Integrated, then please click on that.
Yeah.
Then see after just below camera, 2-3 options will come. Can you see yourself there?
It's just showing integrated camera and it's not showing me anything else.
Some camera related issue.
Yeah, suddenly. I literally did a whole day of Skype calls today and this has happened.
Okay.
I'm really sorry. I should have checked before.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Absolutely all right. I think we can move ahead. And in the meantime, you could try to join us with the camera, but I think we
go
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, thank you to Professor Patel and to all the organizers for organizing this, and to all the participants for their patience, because I can only imagine what listening for 4 hours without breaks is like. I appreciate your commitment to going beyond the binary than is mine. I don't think I could have done 20 hours of lectures. And I'm really grateful also for all the people who went before me. It's really the most kind of wonderful set of people to follow, who really allow you to who really make space for conversation. So I'm really grateful to Rituparna, Aksa, and Aro today. And of course, nothing better than your student being smarter than your teacher. Okay. So without further ado, I wanted to make a really short presentation, mostly in order to leave time for conversation later. But I'll try to do this in time. So the intent of my session is to kind of take off from where Aro left us, which is around the question of history. And I wanted to actually kind of problematize the ways in which a certain kind of history is generally written around trans people, which is to find trans people in history. So what do you find is evidence of, say, gender nonconformity or cross-dressing or practices, theatrical practices, and so on and so forth, as a history that evidences trans people in time and in the past. And we see this constantly in the struggle for rights. Say, for example, both the Navte Johar judgment of 2018 and the Nalsa judgment, the 2 judgments that Aksa mentioned, referred to how trans people have existed from, say, times immemorial. And what I wanted to do is kind of problematize the ways in which we tend to find trans people in history. And what I want to suggest is that that problem affects some of the problems that trans people suffer in the contemporary. And so that's the kind of large intention. But I have an even larger intention with the kind of canvas I'm painting today, which is to actually suggest that if you were to kind of pay attention to the trans movement or movements in this country, you would be able to see, by paying attention to what is happening with them, the continuities between colonial law and post-colonial society. So if since 1947, we have imagined reform in law as a kind of decolonial move, and we tend to see the Nalsa judgment as some kind of decolonial move. And we know that a lot of machinery of the government was spent on producing that particular narrative. What I want to suggest is actually the opposite, which is that that there is that actually Nalsa fulfills a certain kind of colonial fantasy. And this is not only about, say, whether stigma remains or whether trans people haven't been fully accepted. What I want to suggest is that there was a certain kind of figuration of what it means to be trans that began in the colonial period and ultimately failed, but which something like the law in post-colonial and independent India manages to do and complete. And it does through not by force, not by non-consent, but by actually producing consent, by asking people for making citizenship subject to one's subjection. And so I want to speak about this relationship between the colonial and the post-colonial by looking at the making of a certain kind of trans figure in post-colonial law. Lastly, what I want to suggest is that as in our current discourse, and we know this particularly, rights are sabotaged by an increasingly carceral state. And what I want to suggest is that instead of imagining human rights or citizenship rights as the opposite of carcerality and as like tied to freedom, what I want to suggest is actually that rights and carcerality are inseparable. And what I want to, I'm going to stop using the word suggest at some point, but what I want to offer to all of you is an imagination that perhaps rights come with their own forms of carcerality. And in this, by studying the construction of the trans figure, we might be able to see what that really means. So without further ado, let me go into the thick of my presentation. So Aksa mentioned this, that during the pandemic, the government of India, the great government of India, because we're supposed to say that, the great government of India released the rules for the Trans Act, right? And there was massive furor and anger within the trans community around these rules. And this had, of course, everything to do with the conditions in which these rules were let out, which was in the middle of the pandemic, in a lockdown, where the certain kind of organization that is necessary for galvanizing public opinion, for suggesting edits and reforms to these rules was simply not available, right? Trans people, like Aksa shared, simply don't have the resources to be able to give Government of India advice during a lockdown in 30 days. But what was the advice they wanted to give? A lot of the advice that civil society organizations and trans activists gave to the Government of India relied heavily on the Nalsa judgment. This was particularly around two things. One was the demand for reservation, which Aro hinted at, which of course in Nalsa is not horizontal, but is actually simply under the category of OBC. And we can discuss that later. And the second was around the capacity of a district magistrate and a chief medical officer to certify whether or not we can choose not simply trans, but male and female as our identity, right? And so it's not necessary for trans people to only and always be trans. It is possible that trans people can identify as male and female, and actually in identity documents that makes more sense because of the kinds of problems that Aksa had outlined. You know, if wards are divided between male and female, it makes more sense to be one or the other. And passports, so many countries don't take up trans identities and so on and so forth. There are 1,000 problems. I'm not going to go into that. But the register of the protest was one that went to the NALSA Act of 2014 and to particularly the executive order at the end of the act that had said that trans people have the right to self-determination, right? And that right to self-determination meant that they get to decide their gender, right? It is not a doctor or a counselor or a district magistrate or anyone who gets to say we are trans. We get to say we are trans or whatever our gender is. And of course, NALSA, of course, offers that right to everyone, but cis people aren't interested in that right. So, but the NALSA judgment sets up self-determination as an important right. Now, what I want to suggest is actually that is a very strategic reading of the NALSA Act, where we rely heavily as activists only on the part that is usable, right? Which is that the part of the executive judgment where both judges agree that the trans people have a right to self-determination. However, if you read the judgment is given by two judges, Justice Sikri and Justice Radhakrishnan, and the two judges are actually divided amongst themselves. Whereas one judge is fully in accordance with the right to self-determination of gender, the other judge kind of flounders. And he sometimes suggests maybe there should be a doctor, maybe there should be a counselor, maybe there should be someone else, etc., right? And so the kinds of problems that arose in the Trans Act and its rules are actually problems that are at the center of NALSA if you read the body of the text itself, right? So you can actually, the government of India can, in its defense, go to the NALSA judgment and choose parts that allow to quash the trans protest, right? Now, what I want to suggest is that this confusion that is internal to the trans law, whether as judgment or as act, are actually confusions far deeper than simply the disagreement between two judges. What I want to suggest is that if you were to look at the history of jurisprudence in this country before NALSA came out, the conversation on equality between the sexes happened on the grounds of Article 1415, which is equality before law and non-discrimination. And remember that the Constitution does not use the category of gender, but uses the category of sex, right? And what NALSA had done was to read the category of gender into the category of sex. However, what we realize is that before this happened, all the cases that went about, say, equality of opportunity between men and women were about equality as such, right? So say, for example, during the 1970s, there's a very famous case of a nurse who goes to the court, to the Supreme Court, because he happens to be a man. And he, as a man who was also a nurse, was not allowed to be promoted to senior nurse, because at that time, the category of senior nurse was not available to men. Of course, Alfred wins the case, and there is equality of opportunity. So remember that in the Constitution, and especially in the jurisprudence in the courts, the category of sex is a category that is meant to ensure equality and not really supposed to read power, right? And so it is a repetitive place where a certain kind of idea that no man should be denied what a woman has and no woman should be denied what a man has, right? And so it works with that. The NALSA judgment, actually, which is called the third gender judgment, is the first time that the court is actually thinking about the category of gender. So it's quite ironic that it mentions the third gender, but it is actually the first gender, right? It is the first time gender is actually being described in the courts. And so the confusions become actually part of the confusions that feminists have always led us to, which is that by suggesting that sex is biological, gender is social construction, gender becomes the space where all kinds of flux happens, where all kinds of movement happens, where all kinds of fluidity happens. And sex was created as this kind of space on which gender was kind of whitewashed. And this was really part of feminist conversations in India, at least till the late 2000s. And so what we see is that when the Supreme Court decides on the category of transgender, what it actually does is that because the court is interested in keeping sex as natural, all the flux of gender is given into this third category called transgender, right? So all the problems of gender become transgender. So any kind of movement that happens between, in say, what an earlier kind of outdated feminist discourse called femininity and masculinity becomes problems of being trans, right? And this is very particular about how you even see trans autobiographies in the contemporary. The trans autobiographies always was, I was a boy, but I loved playing with dolls, or I was a woman and I never liked playing with dolls, and so on and so forth. So the problems of being male or female become problems of masculinity and femininity, and trans people become the symptom of all kinds of flux of gender, right? And so because the Supreme Court doesn't know what is gender, they give all the confusion onto this one category called transgender, right? So transgender sometimes are intersex people, transgender sometimes are kothis, sometimes they're Aravanis, sometimes they're Jogappas, sometimes they're Hijras. Trans men sometimes come, sometimes don't, as I guess maybe in sex, and so on and so forth. So it's really a lot of confusion. And all of that confusion is because it was the first time that Supreme Court was grappling with this category called gender, in which something like difference was being negotiated as against sameness, which was the earlier principle under the category of sex. Now, I want to suggest that this is therefore an important moment in the history of the invention of gender, right? And that's where I gave the reading by Oyeyunke Oyewumi. I asked people to read the preface of this book called The Invention of Woman, written in 1997 by the most stunning scholar I know, and perhaps the most important book ever written in the history of feminism. The Invention of Women is a book by Oyeyunke Oyewumi about the Oyo Yoruba tribe located mostly around Nigeria. And Oyewumi pays attention to how white anthropologists wrote about her tribe, right? And she suggests that actually when the white anthropologist came, he saw gender everywhere, right? As part of the colonial state, when he saw people with breasts, he gave them women. And when he saw people with penises, he made them men, right? And this is really important because Oyewumi went to the records and was quite surprised by the fact that the story of a community was written. And now it's very interesting what happens, because in the language of the Oyo Yorubas, it is not possible to refer to the gender of a person who you have not seen alive, right? And so say, for example, the colonial anthropologist goes to the oldest person in the tribe for oral history. And that person is, say, 100 years old. Let's just imagine. And then that person has seen the oldest person who's another 100 years old. So maybe say the history of 200 years can be written with some idea of gender in that language, right? But the anthropologist that Oyewumi finds has written for 400 years. How did that happen? How is it that he has written a history where there are kings and queens going back up to 400 years? Because the anthropologist uses a certain kind of lexicon of gender, where certain kinds of people become kings because of the traits, because of how they are spoken about, and so on and so forth, even as the language itself has no room to refer to them as a king or a queen, right? So some people who are weaker become queens, some people who are stronger become kings, some people who show quote unquote white femininity become queens, and so on and so forth. You get the drift, right? And so what I want to suggest is that actually what Oyewumi tells us is this is important because amongst the Yorubas, The organization of society and its roles is not on the basis of gender, but on the basis of age. That is, there are 5 ways in which people can be assigned roles, all of which are based on your relationship to your elders, right? And so roles are not divided socially by gender, but by age, right? So in a community where community is organized by age, the white anthropologist goes and finds gender everywhere because he is used to finding gender. And remember that, as I will show, gender is an imperial project. And so what happens, and this is the kind of violence that is committed on the trans community from the colonial time onwards. For example, one of the most important ethnographies of the trans community written in India is by Gayatri Reddy with respect to sex, in which Reddy explains to us that the Hijra Gharana is not organized only on recognition of gender, but actually on hierarchy, a hierarchy of respect, right, of izzat. And so what she suggests is that the Gharana is located, to belong to a Gharana is to belong to its political economy of respect, which is this kind of other respect to, say, what Aro was raising around Swabhiman and so on and so forth. Because remember that the Telangana Hijra intersex community is also very Hijra dominated, right? So it's a place where, say, Periyar ideas of self-respect meet with Gharana ideas of Izzat and so on and so forth. And Hyderabad is also the site that Gayatri Reddy studies in her ethnography. And so again, the Gharana is by contemporary scholars, etc., written only through the axis of gender, right? And so here, for example, in this big banner, you see beyond binaries, right? And the binary is imagined to be of gender, right? It's not the binary of, say, humiliation and self-regard and so on and so forth. It is the binary of gender. And that is how trans people are generally viewed. They are viewed visually to be seen as stepping aside from certain kinds of norms of gender, even as the ways in which Hijra folks might interpolate themselves, maybe not through visual, say auditory, say a clap, or other kinds of ways, right? And izzat and so on and so forth. Now, I want to suggest that this kind of visual colonial economy it can be also located in India. And if I could ask that the document that I had shared be showed on screen. Now, what I'm sharing here is a document from the Colonial Archive. This is a report by a French anthropologist in the 18th century, in the 19th century, sorry, in the 1800s, by a French anthropologist, French doctor actually, who comes, actually a doctor who comes on behalf of the French government, called Dr. Roberts. And Dr. Roberts writes a report about, so he is stationed to do scientific research around the Cant in Faridabad, not very far from where I am in Delhi. And he writes this diary entry. If we could go to the second page at the bottom, and if we could just kind of zoom into the bottom, it would say female eunuchs of central India. Remember, because not just in, yeah, thank you so much. Not just in Akhand Bharat, but also in pre-partition Bharat, Faridabad would be central India. And so, and that's not a conversation I'm willing to go into very much. But so on the instruction of the Ministry of France, Dr. Roberts writes this in 1845, and he says, and I'm just going to read this very quickly, and you can read, and maybe this document can be shared by everyone, and you can read the whole report. But and I'll just kind of summarize this because I know that I'm running short of time. So he is stationed in the cantonment. And suddenly these people come in wearing very kind of flowing kind of gowns, and they're singing girls, and they have these kinds of instruments in their hand, and they start playing and singing very loudly. And then suddenly he recognizes, as you see, the masculine voices of the singers, right? And then there's strange movements. And at that point, he first thinks that they were thugs. But after some conversation and in consideration of a few rupees, they were induced to visit me at a late hour. We know what that means. In my quarters. They now assured me that I was the first person to whom they had revealed their degraded condition. So Dr. Roberts' first impulse is not to imagine them to be hijras, but to actually imagine them to be thugs. And that actually tells you something about the colonial economy, because it is quite common in colonial, in what is kind of modern India, that various people were transgressing gender norms around clothing. And this transgression as understood by the white anthropologist eyes, right? And so here it could be a thug, it could be a dancer, it could be singing girls, it could be many people, but it is only on the examination of their body that he decides that these are hijras. And the whole report is written by this white doctor anthropologist, kind of explaining to the French government what he saw. And he describes, and I don't want to show the rest of the document because it's kind of full of gory detail about scars and so on, because with disgust also comes kind of the inability to look away. And so he's describing in great detail the scars on their bodies, and he's explaining which person, who could have done it, how could this operation be have done, and so on and so forth. And of course, at the end of the report, he decides to go to some random Brahmin in the middle of the country and ask him who are these people and so on and so forth. Now, I want to raise three things from this report, right? The first thing is, of course, the easier thing, which Lata Mani has shown us even better than I would, is that actually the colonial state creates all kinds of knowledges of marginalized people by creating that knowledge with Brahmins, right? And so this Pandit in the middle of nowhere who just wants to make some money has now decided to give the kind of God-sent opinion about who these people are, even though, of course, these people would be nowhere close to who he is, right? And so it is about the relationship between colonial epistemology and Brahminical knowledge. The second, of course, is about the visual economy of deciding who people are based on their scars. And this is where, say, again, a certain kind of medical jurisprudence and the colonial state meet all together. And the third, of course, is around this narrative of gender transgression. And what I want to suggest is that these three tropes are actually the tropes that solidify in the Trans Act, right? In the Trans Act, again, a certain kind of Brahminical knowledge about who these people are, built on, say, whether we were in the Ramayanas or the Mahabharata or whatever the fuck we were in, solidifies our identity and galvanizes a certain kind of public around us and creates a certain kind of epistemology of what it means to be trans, which of course ignores all the kinds of diversity within the trans community. The second is, of course, the medical doctor and the colonial state meet together in the district magistrate and the chief medical officer, who then certify who trans people are. And the third and most importantly is that much like the report by the white anthropologist, where trans people never get to speak in their own voice who they are, again, in the Trans Act, other people can represent us, but not ourselves, right? And so again, what the colonial anthropologist did in his small report, and this is really one random report amongst many that I have collected in the archives, is that what he does is what the state now does, is that we can sign a form whatever we want to, but it is really the district magistrate and the chief medical officer who have the final opinion and the discretion, who get to say who we are, right? And so what I want to suggest is actually, even though the colonial state gave up, as Jessica Hinchey has shown us, trying to control the Hijra community by locating them in the Criminal Tribes Act, precisely because of the relationship between Thuggery and Hijra communities, right? Between nomadic populations, between performing communities and so on and so forth. That relationship, they weren't very successful in controlling them. And Jessica Hinchey shows how the Criminal Tribes Act could not simply control all the diversity of the Hijra Gharana. They tried very hard to kind of end trans people and lead to this genocide. But now actually, instead of a genocide, you have citizenship, where a certain kind of colonial way of looking at trans people can now be solidified. It's bizarre that the Hindutva government in power suggests that they have finally released us from Victorian morality, when actually what they have done is solidified the Victorian stereotype of what a trans person is in the law, right? And so and this Ranajit Guha had done much before I could, and Antonio Gramsci and so on and so forth, when force does not work, consent does, right? And so by creating consent for citizenship, by suggesting that you will gain certain kinds of rights, etc., by agreeing to how the state looks at you, we are willing to incarcerate ourselves in these colonial fantasies of who we are, right? And that's my small submission. I hope I've made myself clear, and I look forward to any doubts or questions you might have. Thank you so much for your patience and listening. I wish you a lovely dinner if I don't get to speak after.
We extend our sincerest appreciation for you, gracing us with your esteemed presence during the session. And moving forward, I would request Professor Vibhuti Patel to provide her remarks.
Enrich the discourse by bringing in whole question of political economy and the decolonialism and the way colonial economy and Brahminical knowledge they are solidified in the Trans Act. We had not seen Trans Act from that perspective. We knew what is wrong with the Trans Act, but seeing its antecedents in the colonial discourse, and I think that's a very, very enriching, and it has also generated healthy curiosity to study deeper into this, whatever references you have given. And I think they take it in a public domain, the discussion on that. And the way you say that it is the way the incarceration takes place, no? The whole trajectory of criminalization of the trans community, and also the Citizenship Act and the whole concept of citizen all along our post-independence period. We have used concept of citizenship as something very progressive, very liberating, very secular humanist. But now, looking at the current last 5-6 years development, I think one wonders whether we should use this term, because the way citizenship also excludes people, not only the religious minorities or so-called refugees or so-called infiltrators, and also the gender minorities. So I think it's a very, very insightful presentation that you have made, and it has also had a massive, it's going to have a massive ripple effect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Now the floor is open for questions from the audience. I'll keep it short. We are already, running late. So yeah, the floor is open for questions.
Yeah. Questions.
नहीं है, सबको भूख लगी है, उनको डिनर खाना है, जाने दो.
3 क्वेश्चन तो है ही ऑलरेडी आपके लिए ना.
Oh no.
अच्छा, therefore I'll be at 7:58. Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll be waiting a minute for the questions, and if not, we'll be moving ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Participants can raise their hands if they have any questions.
You're free to raise your hand and switch, on your mic and ask the question.
Or Professor Patel, if you have any question to Vikramji.
Yeah. I think in terms of way ahead, what would you like to say? Because where we are, it's also quite horrifying, the situation. But what do you see as a ray of hope? Vikramaditya ji. Yeah.
I see the 3 people who I followed.
Yeah.
Which is that I follow in the footsteps of Rituparna, Aksa, and Aro. I think each of them told us very important ways in which we can kind of think about movement building, kind of our workspaces and what we do to spaces that we enter, and of course, intimacies, sexualities, and friendships. And I think that they have done a far better job. And what I, as a Savarna idiot can do is simply listen to people who are really at the forefront. So I would suggest we can go back and listen to the presentations again.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah. Okay. There is a question from Riya Yadav, I think, for you. Just now she has written in the question box. Riya Yadav, can you unmute yourself? Hello?
Ma'am, Debarshi ji has asked a question.
Because she has also asked about Kimberly Crenshaw, no?
Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, Debashi, you're here. So why don't you?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, or I can read the question. Can participation in local governments give empowerment to the queer community?
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of queer folks who are invested in that project, which is say everyone from Grace Bano to Disha Pinky Sheikh and so on and so forth. I think I don't think it's a yes or a no. I think the real conversation is about what that work involves, right? And where do people like Grace and Disha and even Aksa, who I know tries to work very hard around organizing as a Muslim trans woman, where do they put their foot down, right? And because a lot of the ways in which we think about local government is by us making compromises. But actually the way forward is when trans people refuse to break their backs, bending over for the government. And something happens interesting there. And I would love someday to collect all these voices and listen to them. I will suggest that on YouTube, there are a few panels where trans people do discuss political participation and organizing.
Yeah.
Some of them were organized by my last office at CLPR. So if you do look those up, they are under the rubric of Transform, which was an international conference that we used to organize. You would find some of these conversations, and I would again bow down to their wisdom and advice rather than say anything more.
We also have a request for you, Vikramaditya. So someone is requested for maybe your email ID if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have the email ID in the chat box. Everyone, can look into it. Yes, so if should we wait for further questions or should I move ahead, ma'am?
You can move ahead. We
can move ahead.
9 o'clock.
So Patel, if you want to give closing remarks, or we can go with vote of thanks.
Yeah.
Or you can summarize. Yeah.
Yeah. I think after yesterday's 4 presentations, which exposed us to the terminologies, conceptual issues, and the introduction to trans life, and more deeply the existential struggle that we have today, I think the discourse is far more deeper, where the Rituparnaji's first very, very optimistic presentation about the queerness, rural reality, and the movement building from the rural perspective, I think that was extremely illuminating, because he talked about the trials and tribulations of mobilizing the queer community, and also the various forms of interventions they have taken to sensitize the educational institution, local self-government, political bodies, and the media. I think that was a very eye-opening. The second thing, Dr. Aksa's demystification of about the medical knowledge, and also medical knowledge about the trans-specific challenges. I think that was very, very useful. Even some of the pictures she has shown, I think for the first time, I'm sure the participant would have seen the enormity, and her statement that trans people need far more medical services than the quote unquote average person. And I think that is a very convincing case she has made. And I think that is wherever we are, we have to ask for, we have to raise these questions with the healthcare system. The question of political economy, I think it figured in all 4 presentations, because the material reality, and at the social relations level and the power politics that plays, which is intersectional, and the caste patriarchy. I think Aro's presentation was extremely illuminating. And the alternatives that they have created, that is not only the soft stories, but also the stories for Swabhiman and the self-respect and the collective efforts which are being made by the younger generation is very, very illuminating. And the last one, the history of trans as gender, I think how the rights are sabotaged by increasing carcelarity. I think that was very illuminating. And the state, how does the state is continuing the Victorian legacy of looking at the trans body and both the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act to 2019 and the rules where the double standards are shown. I think they are that also has its genesis in the way colonial regime looked at the trans people, and criminalization, stigmatization, and also exclusion. So that we see. So I think it was a very important this thing, because it also gives us a pathway of bringing the changes, like how do we intervene wherever we go as a trainer or teacher or negotiate with the state. What kind of demands are we going to put forward? I'm not saying that it is just the job of the trans community. I fully agree with Dr. Aksa when she says that nothing without us, nothing about us without us, but as a matter of solidarity, what all can we do? The question of this whole the socio-psychological problems that the trans community has to face, the societal level discrimination in different forms, such as job discrimination, housing discrimination, exclusion from social gathering, that needs to be addressed by public debates and social action. That is the role of you and me, everybody. In several states, legal prosecution still occurs as there is no law that provide protection against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. Recently published and recently debated report by PUCL that where the parents or the family members abandon their own trans children, how do they face the societal atrocities and the discrimination? I think that is that's why at a peri-urban and rural areas, the way Rituparna ji is working in Assam, I think we all need to start this kind of action. One good thing in India is that feminist movement and the LGBTQIA movement, they are both in principle and in practice, they are working together. And I think that is a very encouraging learning that we got. A lack of support from family, friend, and community can be answered in terms of creation of alternate community of people who respect, and not only respect, but who also practice gender diversity, inclusivity, and also the friendship, long-lasting, trustworthy, expansive, and creation of a non-threatening environment, the way we believe in consciousness raising in women's movement. So the organizations can make it challenging for individuals to cope with challenges of living in society where homosexuality is considering the taboo, that is a mainstream reality. But at the same time, we have to create a new alternative at every level, wherever you are, whether you are in a college or university or school or workplaces or in the community. I think we need to create the accepting world. I think that is the message of today's presentation. I really learned a lot, and I offer my heartfelt thanks on behalf of me, IMPRI team, and also the participants to Rituparna Niyokji, Dr. Aksa, Aro Akun, and Vikramaditya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. With your due permission, I would like to move ahead with the word of thanks.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
As we come to the end of day 2 of Beyond Binaries, Understanding Sexual Identities and Queer Rights Issue in India, an online international summer school program, a 5-day immersive online certificate training course, I, Samriddhi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Gender Impact Studies Center, GISC, New Delhi. We are grateful to all our experts for the day 2 session, Rituparna Nyogji, Dr. Aksa Sheikh, Aro Akunji, and Vikramaditya Sehai for taking out their valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. The readings for the session has been shared in your email, and the videos of the session will also be shared with you for learning. We thank all the participants for their who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you tomorrow, that is the 21st of June at 6 p.m. For our 3rd day of the certification course by our panel of experts. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.